Welcome to Paris Roubaix, the race for hard men here in the north of France. Hot on the heels of the Tour of Flanders, was preceded by Paris Roubaix Sportif last weekend, which ran at the same time as the Tour of Flanders. Running from Compiègne, just in the north of Paris, up to Roubaix, this sort of industrial area on the borders of Belgium. 27 sections of bone-shattering cobbles in terrible condition. Farm roads to be negotiated that really haven't changed an awful lot for the 110 years that this race has been going. Here we are, Roubaix. The last little section is probably the easiest of all, just 300 meters on the final run in to the outdoor velodrome here in Roubaix. Johan van Summeren won last year when all the big favourites marked each other and just watched and watched and watched until it all fell over for them, really. And Johan van Summeren was allowed to ride away. He comes in then as defending champion here in Paris-Roubaix. This is the race for hard men, the hell of the north. Early breakaway going away. The average speed in the first 2 hours was 47 kilometers an hour. Surely that can't be sustained. The very fastest ever race was in 1964, won by Dutch hardman Peter Post, who went on to manage the TI Rally team, of course, and had a fantastic team on their track as well. 45.129 kilometers per hour. And they've averaged 47 kilometers an hour so far today. Here are the men in the break. Guillaume van Kresbolk of the Omega Pharma Quick Step team. They needed somebody in the break because the big favorite, of course, is Tom Bonneveer. Jaroslav Popovic of Radio Shack, Nissan Kenny de Haas of Lotto Belisol, Frederik Verschillen and Barchen Lindemann of the Vacances Soleil team, David Boucher of FDJ Big Matt. You can put money on that one. You get very short odds, though, I'm afraid, on him being in a breakaway. Michael Morkov, likewise, of Team Saxo Bank. Dominic Clemmer of the Argos Shimano team, formerly the what we call the project team. Laurent Mangel of French team Sojason. Alexis Saramontits, the Latvian rider riding for Cofidis, and Grisha Janovski of Germany riding for Team NetApp, once again being in here. And there we are. This is the head of the race with Boucher in here. You could have, as I said, put money on him being in there, couldn't you? He's a breakaway specialist, as they say. 4 minutes and 2 seconds is the gap. It's been pegged at about 4.25, 4.5 minutes, right the way from the time the break settled down. But an average speed of 47 kilometers an hour. Well, opting to ride on the dirt at the side of the road is Frederik Verschillen. It's easier to ride there, but you're more likely to get cobbles. Mind you, what am I talking about? I've only done it as an amateur, and I've only ridden these cobbles just for fun, and did so, I think the last time I really did it was when the tour finished in Arenberg, and I was ably helped by a man who knows more about cobbles than most people alive, winner of 2 editions of Paris-Roubaix, sitting next to me back in the commentary box after Brian Smith took his place for Flanders last week, and we're grateful to Brian for that. It's Sean Kelly. Welcome, Sean. This is a pretty tough race, whichever way you look at it.
Yes, good afternoon. It's certainly a tough race. It is the classics, the monument of the classics, I think, because of the terrain. The classics, the distance of that 250, 260 kilometers, but here over 50 kilometers over this style of terrain, and there's some of it really, really in bad condition. As you said, it's not the roads that are used by general public, they're just used by the farmers to get to the fields, and some of them are in very, very poor state. Luckily today we can see on our screens it's dry, it's good, and I think that's nice. It's nice for the moment, but there is a bit of cloud hanging around. Forecast is good. They say it's not going to rain, but when you look ahead there, you can see there's some cloud hanging about, and hopefully it holds off for everybody, because for the riders first of all, but for us as commentators to recognise the riders when they get covered in mud, it's so difficult to know anybody.
It just goes to show how dry it's been in this area, though, over the last few weeks. or a few months, in fact, the whole of Northern Europe suffering from a sort of lack of rain. Anyway, from Scotland downwards, the dust already being kicked up from the motorbikes and from that breakaway. It's a good, strong breakaway. Omega Pharma Quickstep have got a man in the break, Guillaume van Kulsbroek. They needed that man in there because the massive favourite, Sean, here is Tom Bonen. Fabian Cancellara out, quadruple break of the clavicle, the collarbone. His luck just ran out in the end. Or did his luck just run out? Because we were discussing it beforehand. Is he a bit casual these days?
Well, it's difficult to know, exactly what happened last week. We did not see it on our screens. And in the feeding stations, it's always hectic. And, looking at it, it's just crazy there. There's so much people, spectators, first of all. I think that is a big problem in the feed stations in those big races. All the spectators, they flock to that area. They're there with the masseurs, and it's just chaos. And unfortunately for Cancellara last week, whatever the reason was, he seemed to have ridden over a bottle, came down and broke his collarbone, and it just happened so easily. It's difficult to know exactly what went wrong, but he's the one, was in really good shape. He will be missed here today because this style of race, he's so powerful, and he just puts up a great performance. And pity we haven't got him here.
It is a pity. Oh, crash in the bunch here. Liquid Gas rider from Liquid Gas down. The man on the floor from the project team is Tom Stamschneider. The cyclocross specialist. Well, his father was a great cyclocross rider. Oops! All over the shop, people are falling. And it looks like a Dutch champion there, down on the floor. Couldn't quite work out who it was, actually, who was on the floor. But just catching a wheel and going down. Now, Sky beginning to drive at the front of the peloton here. They have two men capable of doing, well, three actually. Fletcher, Bernhard Eisen, Lindeval, Bosenhagen. Bosenhagen not quite on form last week, I don't think, in the Tour of Flanders. Bonen winning in the end. For me, it's going to be looking at those two big guys from last week who are slightly more suited to these big, long cobble races. Tom Bonen, absolutely overwhelming favourite. People put Zato in very, very good shape as Gustav last. I thought it was last one for a minute, but it isn't. Pushing along. Already some people beginning to suffer, not enjoying it whatsoever. You have to be a certain type of rider, don't you, to enjoy this one?
Well, you have to be a real powerful, strong rider. The big riders that have the weight, which is 75-80 kilos, you have an advantage there because they naturally have the power, and to get over the cobbles you need a lot of power. It's not the smaller climbers can do this style of race, and it's a race where you can look at the start of around 195 riders today. There's probably 20 riders capable of winning that, where in the other classics, if you go to the Ardennes Classics, Flèche Wallonne, Amstel Gold, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, there's much more riders capable of winning it, and that's because of over those very difficult cobble sections. It's a small amount of riders capable of winning today.
Sky taking up the pace setting on the front. Merci Frédéric Guédon. Guédon, the oldest man in the field. The digital banner on the right hand side for there. Guédon, 41 years of age. Won this race. He's one of 4 winners who are riding today. He won this race back in 1997, would you believe? And 10 years later went on to win Paris Tour, a completely different type of race. But wouldn't that be fantastic if we saw him in the final selection at least? We'll take a short break. Welcome back. Live pictures here from what is the toughest, probably single-day race in the world. It's always the riders that make the race, but if you wanted to throw as many things at them as possible, this is the one. 257.7 kilometers with over 50 kilometers of cobbles. Paris Roubaix 2012. This is the 110th edition, and so one of the Lamprey riders going down on the right-hand side, just overcooking the corner. All sorts of things get in the way of riders here. It's not just the cobblestones themselves. Some of the spectators, let's have a look at it. Whoop, just losing it on the corner, actually, as he tucked in. Tight bend to get the whole peloton through, but they should be, they're pretty used to it, these guys. All sorts of things get in the way, apart from there's not so much road furniture in the sense that they have in in Holland and so forth, but lots of spectators sitting around, especially on the cobbled sections. And sometimes they just, how should we say, they're out for a good day, the spectators, and they do get a bit leery. We've seen them encroaching several times, Sean, over the years onto the cobbles. I think it gets worse every year.
Well, certainly on the important sector of cobbles, we will see them as we get much later into the race. They've been there all day, 3-4 hours, 5 hours maybe, having a few beers, and they're really up for it when the race come by. So they can be an obstruction to the riders. But there we see the Lamprey rider. He just lighted out, I think. In miscalculation, he went to the corner a little bit too fast, maybe went too heavy on his brakes. And the problem is in the Paris Roubaix, when you come off a section of cobbles, if there's a lot of dust, as it is today, well, then you have to be careful, because it's on your tyres, and if you go onto the asphalt road and you go into a corner very quickly, you have to be just that little bit careful, because you can slide out very easily.
As we said, there's a group of riders up the road. They've got a gap of 4:19 at the moment. They're quite happy to leave them at that level for the moment. There's 121 kilometres to go, and it won't be until they hit the cobblestones proper, the big sections of cobblestones, that the race will really start to kick off. We'll talk about Sean in a minute. Let's run through the breakaway riders. Guillaume van Kielsbroek of Belgium, riding for Omega Pharma Quick-Step. Their big man, of course, is the pre-race favourite, Tom Bonen. And the press, the Belgian press and the French press, absolutely stacked with Bonen material. L'Equipe had a very interesting article. I suppose it's, for those people who follow bike racing, it's not unusual to see, but interesting anyway, to compare Tom Bonen with his other Flandrian, nearest Flandrian rivals, for 3-time winners of Roubaix, multiple winners of Roubaix. Riders like Van Petegem and more so Johan Museeuw. Van Petegem and Museeuw from the same era of riding. Museeuw, the Lion of Flanders, as they call him after Big Scott, who was originally the Lion of Flanders, the second Lion of Flanders. And he was characterised as a man who pretty much stayed at home, lived in the house in Hessel where he was born. And Van Petegem living in Brakel, which is not so far from Oudenaarde, and just content to be Flandrians really, whereas Tom Bonen, the big race favourite here, went off and lived in Monaco and enjoyed a pretty good playboy lifestyle, what with this women and recreational habits and fast cars, but he's moving back to Belgium. They've got a man in the break, Van Kielsbroek. They need him in there because they've got to police that move as much as they can. He is the marked favourite, Tom Bonen, the team leader of Omega Pharma Quick-Step. Also in the break, the faithful lieutenant for so many people. For Fabian Cancellara, it would have been, is Jaroslav Popovic. He's ridden for so many big riders as a lieutenant. He's a sort of Jean Stablinski of his day, isn't he, really? I mentioned Stablinski because he's intimately linked with Paris Roubaix, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But he's allowed to get away in the break today. There will be riding for Gregory Rust today. Rust, the Swiss rider, finished well up last year. I wonder what Tony Galopin can do if he's got anything in the legs. He was good in Flanders, just caught in that little crash that the Paris-Roubaix winner from last year, Jan van Sommeren, caused on the Patersburg last weekend. So Galopin couldn't chase on, but he's looking very, very good indeed. Also in the break, Canada Haas from the Lotto Belisol team. He came from the Top Sport Vlaanderen team, knows these roads and this type of racing very, very well. Vakenslee got two men in the break, so always aggressive. Frederik Verschulen and Bartje Lindemann, the Belgian and the Dutchman, both in the break. Stan de Volder will be their big hope today, although he's pretty poor, I have to say, in Flanders, despite being good a week before. Boucher in the break, well, you could have better to say money on that. Francis Dujour, big Matt's breakaway specialist. Frederic Guédon wears the 1-1-1 on his back for Francis Dujour, winner in 1997 here. Michael Moorcock in the break, likewise like Boucher, is becoming a bit of a breakaway specialist. I think this is, if I'm right in saying so, this is the third classic or semi-classic we've seen him in the break in the last month. David Villiers, the Canadian rider, riding for Team Europcar. Dominic Klemmer of Argus Shimano. Sarah Montins of Cofidis. And Janicic of Team Neta. Neta, of course, ride last year here, which is good for them. They seem to be getting in a lot of good races this year. 118.9 kilometres to go, and the gap is going out just a little bit. This gives you an idea of some of the nicer cobbled sections here. fairly smooth, this one. Unlike some of the Tour of Flanders sections here, Sean, these roads have never been touched in the same way as the Flanders roads, like the Old Quermont, for example. Back in the 60s, they tried to put asphalt over the top of it, and they had to scrape it all off again after a protest from race bike fans. But really, these roads have never really been touched, or hardly ever, although there's a Friends Society.
Yes, well, the difference is that the roads we see in the Tour of Flanders, like the Old Quaremont, it's a road that's being used every day by the general public, by the cars, by the bikers a lot. Where some of the sections here, it's not the case. Where we are now at the moment, we can see it's a very good section of cobbles, but the more difficult ones, that's where it gets really difficult to get over them. And of course, mechanical problems, that is the big thing on the bad sections of cobbles. There's a lot of stones missing, and that's where you can run into mechanical problem, have flats, crashes, of course. And they're only used by the farmers, as I said. Some of the sections, we'll see later on. There's in the centre, there's a lot of mud there, and at the side you can see where the tractors and the machines go through. But other than that, it's only for the Paris Roubaix that we really use them, except for the farmers going to do their work.
4 minutes 44 seconds. They're quite happy to let them go out for the moment. Okay, let's look at team leaders for today's race. Garmin Barracuda riding for Johan van Summeren. He won last year. He shows he can do this sort of thing time and time again. Slightly not lucky last year, but the race played out into his hands. He was up ahead. Van Summeren taking a very good victory. Actually, there's a lovely bit in the paper about Van Summeren, because if you remember last year he proposed to his girlfriend straight away after he'd won, and there's a double-page spread with his now fiancée. I think his name is Giselle, isn't it? If I remember rightly, about what it's been like after a year of Johan van Summeren winning Paris Roubaix, how it affected his career and their lives and so forth. He went on record, didn't he, Sean, saying that was the worst thing he ever did. Not to propose to her, but to propose where he did, because he had no idea the TV cameras were next to him. 117.2 kilometres. Bonen leads Omega Pharma Quick Step then. Talingi and Lars Boom, joint leaders for Rabobank. Balan leads BMC. Pozzato in super form last week, but I think not aggressive enough in the last couple of kilometres. Just I think he had probably the legs. He looked the strongest in the race. Bonen trying to outsprint Bonen, never going to happen, especially in Flanders. Flescher and Eisel for Sky Pro Cycling. Rast for Radio Shack Nissan. O'Grady for Green Edge. He's freed from any responsibilities he's had for years and years for looking after Cancellara, so we'll see how he can do. Winner in 2007. Greipel leads Lotto Belisol. Paulini, great ride last weekend for Katusha. Chris Bokmans and Stan de Volder, both for Vacances Soleil. Frederic Guédon wears the leader's jersey, or the leader's number for Francis de Jour Big Mat. Tozzato for Team Saxo Bank. Hondo for Lampre. Os, that'll be interesting. If he's still going well, he doesn't have to look after Peter Zagen, although his brother Jurd Zagen is riding today, 2 years older than Peter. Daniel Os freed from that responsibility. He has been going very well, although he faded a bit in the last 15 kilometres of Flanders last weekend. Sebastian Tergo leads Team Europe Cup. It's anybody's guess who's leading AG2 Le Mondial, frankly. Degenkolb will be the man who they try to get up towards the front for Argos Shimano. Pim Litgaard gets back into the rear of the peloton, having fallen over a little bit earlier. The Dutch champion there, 109 at the back for Vacances Soleil. Amador leads Movistar. Murev Astana. And Ogilvent Sajosson. Jesse Sargent from New Zealand up towards the front, pushing the pace along amid. Garmin Cervelo all riding in a big group around Johan van Summeren. Let's not forget, though, that these big teams are bringing very, very strong squads, real strength in depth. And Sean, some of these major teams that are coming here with targeting this race have maybe 2 or 3 or 4 riders who on the right day with the right bit of luck could actually do something. I mean, Garmin is a prime example. Van Sommeren had quite a lot of luck last year. Let's not take it away from him. He rode a brilliant race, but he had a little bit of luck because the tactics behind dictated what was going on. But they've got fantastically powerful riders in here. Jack Bauer, Tyler Farrer is pretty well good at going over this sort of stuff as well. Hausler can ride this sort of thing, although he's a much smaller rider. Andres Clare is an absolute expert at these sorts of things. Sepp van Mark, Sebastian Rosler, huge big rouleur. They've got virtually everybody in that team could do a ride here.
Yes, well, they have a good few riders capable of doing a performance here. They're that style of rider, but I think when you look down through the list, they have to try and get into the break, and it'll be interesting to see what happens as we go further on into the race. We remember last year, of course, after the Arenberg, and there was a lot of movement and a lot of attacking, and that was the tactic of a lot of teams, because if they were going to wait for Cancellara and take him into the last 20-30 kilometres, well then it would be an impossible task to beat him, the form he was in last year. And it's much the same scenario this year with Bonin. I think they're going to try and put men up the road at a point, and that's the teams we will see doing that. Garmin, Barracuda, they have a number of riders capable of getting into a breakaway, and if the breakaway worked as it did last year, well then they have men that are capable of going on and winning a Paris Roubaix from a breakaway. So it will be interesting, the tactics as we go on, and we can see here at the moment there's a lot of teams just playing the waiting game. Quick-Step, Omega Quick-Step, they're just hanging about in the bunch. They have a man in the breakaway, and that's what they are going to do for the moment. Just play the waiting game, get as far into the race as possible. The break, leave it hang at that, around the 4 or 5 minutes, and in the end they can pull that back in the last 30-40 minutes when the racing really has to be done.
They're on the section at Capel-sur-Achelion. And they've moved on from that to this group with on Aulnoy, Valencien to Fermer, which is 2.6 kilometres, one of the longer sections on here, and gets a 5-star rating in terms of difficulty, mainly because of the length, but also because it's extremely rough, Sean. This is a good example of how rough some of these cobbles can be, even though the sets are pretty well in the road here. There's not that many out of the road, but just look at the way the bikes bounce up and down.
Yes, well, this is one of the sections that get a little bit more rougher cobbles, and it all depends on the distance, as you said, and the star rating, of course. That is calculated how difficult the cobbles are, but also the distance had a big bearing. And the most difficult part on the cobbles is when you really start racing hard, and if you race before the cobbles to get onto the section, that's where it can really hurt on the cobbles section itself, because you have to fight so much to get a good position, and then when they race across the cobbles at a very fast rate, that's when we see the bunch really exploding and riders being shot out the rear door full time. So it's all about what way they race over them, and when they really turn the gas up, that's when it hurts big time on all sections, even on the sections which are not that difficult. When you go across them at 50 kilometers per hour, it does hurt a lot.
It seems a good time to speak about the machines themselves, because we're seeing a lot of shots of them. If you're joining us live here on Eurosport, this is Paris Roubaix, 110th edition of the race, one of those milestones. Another couple of milestones. I think the 100th year was won by Museo. The 100th edition, because they're not quite the same, war getting in the way of some of the races, was also won by Museo. But this is the 110th edition of the race itself, with 111 kilometers to go. The machinery themselves, well, years ago people used to experiment, well, back in the early 90s, when there was that explosion in experimentation with bikes, what they could do with the new materials and so forth. There was a lot of work done on suspension and how they could change things to make it more comfortable and race harder. In fact, a couple of editions of this race were won by Gilbert Ducarel with RockShox suspension forks, just the same, with a modified version of the forks that they used on mountain bikes. They produced a road fork. Actually, the great English publisher of books, looks like a rear puncture for Sarah Montids, the great English publisher of books from Mousehold Press, and Sport and Publicity, Richard Olchin actually has a Fondriest frame with early 1990s shocks on it, and they are pretty rare now because they were specifically built for the road. Duclos 1-2 events on those, but they really sort of went out of fashion. The bikes now, all carbon pretty much. There's a few aluminium bikes in the peloton, not that many. Some go for the aluminium frames. Most of them are on carbon fiber now. There's no titanium bikes in this peloton. Neither are there any steel bikes in this peloton whatsoever. Oh dear. BMC down. This is at the front of the peloton, so who's going to be involved in this? The riders all getting tangled up already. Luke Roberts, the Australian rider at the back there, and they're just untangling bikes right, left and centre, desperate to get on the way again. I can't see any big names at the moment. It's difficult to tell. It's sort of somewhere in the middle. Oops, somebody comes in from the right and clips them. They all try and avoid it going to the left, but there's no way around that. Oh, this is a bit of a panic here, Sean. They don't want to get dropped here because it'll split apart with 110 to go, and they'll be fighting to get back on again.
Yes, well, it's all about, staying up in the top 30, not having to fight to get back in. And as we can see there up front, it happened, and a lot of panic. The guys who are further back, halfway down the peloton, they just take the field and start running and get out in the front. And every little effort you have to make here, you pay for it in the end.
Guédon, Frédéric Guédon in the centre of the shot, getting back in again. Oldest man in the peloton, 41 years of age, and coming back from a broken hip, Sean, so that's going to hurt.
Yes, and we can see Russell there as well, one from Garmin. A lot of riders, I think, are quite a bit further back into the peloton at the moment, because we're not into that stage where it's really important. And the big favourites, they try and stay, out of the front line, back in the 15-20 position, just to get as much shelter, get carried along as much as possible, and spare every ounce of energy for the final of this one. And with the crash happening real out front on the front end of the bunch, very much to the top end, a lot of riders, I think, getting caught out.
Frédéric Guédon won this race back in 1997, now 41 years of age, and they're getting a bit caught up. That's just bad luck. This is BMC. The breakaway has just got onto the section 20 of Pavé at Fameux to Querenin. 1.2 kilometres, fairly easy section. The peloton itself remains 4 minutes and 30 seconds behind them, with BMC leading them along at the moment. Alessandro Balan, their big guy at the moment. Okay, let's go back to the technology they use on the bikes now. Sure, nearly all the bikes are carbon. A couple of riders in each team opting for aluminium bikes, but they do try and bring in little things, each manufacturer. I noticed that Bonen's bike's got new straight forks on it for this race. At least they've been trialling them in the last couple of races. A lot of the what they call lawyer's lips in the United States, the safety tags on the forks are all filed out, ready to get the wheels out very quickly indeed, and put them back in again. Double bar tape maybe, but there's not a huge amount done compared to what they used to be done to bikes. Sean, what did you do in your day? Oops, it's one of the Nissan Radio Shack Nissan riders on the right hand side who hits the bank and goes down, and then that causes the pile up.
Yes.
And was it a Green Edge rider? It's very difficult to tell, actually. I think it was a Radio Shack Nissan rider who went down first of all. He's at the bottom of that pile somewhere, I'm sure. Let's go back to the technology. What did you ride in your day, first of all? What special things did you do to this?
Well, I think the most important special is for the Paris Roubaix tyres, where you have a wider tyre, a 24 or 25, where normally in the races they have 23s. So the tyre is a little bit higher, it's wider, but it's also a little bit higher than the normal tyre you would in the normal races, and that prevents the inner tube getting pinched, because on the cobbles you cannot ride your tyres pumped as you would in a normal race. You have to ride them much softer, and depending on the weight of the rider, they calculate that. and if you have them soft, there's always the risk of getting the inner tube pinched. So that's the reason you have this higher tyre. But apart from that, there's not any miracles in Roubaix for the Roubaix race. We've seen it over the years. You talked about Duco Lassalle. He won it on a suspension fork 1 year, but it was a short-lived thing. I think we had it for about 3-4 years. The taping of the bars, you can do that where you put a little bit extra taping just to limit the shock going up through your arms a bit more. But if you look at the bikes this morning, I think there'd be a lot of bikes with just normal one handlebar tape, and off you go. And it's all about, you know, knowing how to ride over the cobblestones as well. I think a lot of people, when they go over the cobblestones, they just hold on to the handlebar too tight, and if you do that, well, then all the shocks goes right up through your body. So you have to relax a bit, and that is part of the tactic of riding over Roubaix, to be relaxed. Hold your bars, you know, pretty tight, but not not locked on them, because if you do that, you're just going to get pains everywhere in your hands and your fingers and your arms, and you're not going to last in a Paris Roubaix. But the problem is for the sportive rider, and I've seen it last year when I did do the sportive Roubaix, the Roubaix race here. People were just very nervous, and if you're nervous, well then it's difficult to ride over in a relaxed style.
Yes, indeed. Well, we'll talk about setting your bike up for cobbles in just a second. We're going to take a short break. It's 108 kilometres, and the group is split to pieces now following that crash. Welcome back live. 3 minutes 50 seconds as the peloton exits section 20 of the cobblestones from Famé to Crerenang. We've got 145.5 kilometres already run, and it's BMC keeping the pace reasonable at the front, not letting it get too far, not letting it get too little. Burkhardt in second place there. Green Edge up towards the front. They'll be riding for O'Grady today. We were talking about bike setups. Everybody asks these questions about what bikes they ride, how do they change them, and so forth. Ready for Paris Roubaix. Well, I can tell you, I had a number of friends, 2 or 3, doing the Paris Roubaix Sportive last weekend, which is the same weekend as the Tour of Flanders, which is why I couldn't do it. Boo hiss. But they know Sean quite well, and they know a couple of other riders. So we took an amalgam of the advice given by Sean Kelly, who's won the race twice, of course, and Bernie Eisel, who's been a faithful rider for many people for many years, and could do quite well today, actually. And the setup was this. The advice was, I tell you what, you're quite a small rider, go and use your cyclo-cross bike, as a number of teams have here. Europe Car have a lot of cyclocross bikes on offer. Of course, you swap out the cyclocross tyres for road tyres. 28mm Continental clinchers. You can ride tubs if you want, but of course a team effort like this, they've got support cars, they can get spare wheels. You can get them on the Sportive as well, but it's just a bit of a pain, really. 28mm clinchers from Conti's 4 Seasons, so they're a little bit more puncture resistant. Run at 55 to 60 pounds pressure, so 5 to 6 bar, something like that. Bar tape, well, you can put a little bit of extra bar tape on if you want, and that's about it. Pretty much it. It worked pretty well. The only other thing that they did was wrap a little bit of small sticky foam around the chainstay and bind it down with gaffer tape, and that stops your chainstay being bashed around by your chain, because as you can see, the chain gets bounced up and down quite a fair bit here. Now, years ago, they did a lot of different things to the bikes. So we're talking about 10, 15 years ago. We talk about Duclos Lassalle's Rock Shocks. Museo rode a Bianchi that was front and rear suspension, which actually was hideous to look at and wasn't particularly successful as it goes. But a lot of people put double bar tape on and so forth. Steve Bauer, if you remember, when he was riding for Motorola, experimented with a really laid-back frame design. He got Eddie Merckx to build a frame that was about the same length as the Forth Bridge. It was incredibly long, and it was absolutely, the theory being that when he got to the cobbles, what he really wanted to do was sit right back and use all his back muscles and his glutes and his calves to really push on those pedals. It was brilliant. Worked absolutely fantastically on the cobbles because he was super comfortable on it as he powered his way in a big gear like the Canadian Steve Bauer did. However, when it got on the road, it was an absolute dog. And that's the problem It's not just a race, Sean, is it, when you're setting up your bike? It's not just a race of cobblestones. It's a race of cobblestones with 2/3 of it being on the road.
Yes, well, that is the problem. You have a lot of normal asphalt road, 257.5 kilometres, 51.5k of cobblestones today. So, to get the balance right is so important, and to get a comfortable ride over the cobbles. Suspensions, they work well, but then you have to carry them weight-wise. They're also not as rigid on the normal road, although you can lock them out now. It's just all about weight, really, and you have to make that calculation. And they've been doing that a lot, and the teams have been doing that. And I can tell you, they've been training out here. A lot of the specialist riders who do the race, they have been looking at it, and it's really come back to just a very much of a standard bike, as we say. The tyres, as we can see, there's the higher tyres. That is, I think, the biggest advantage in this race. The rest, it doesn't serve a lot, and there is no miracles really that you can pull out of the bag.
Tom Bonin in the middle of our shot there. See the straight forks on that bike. These, he says, it's an evolution of the frames he's had last year. It's a little bit more comfortable. Just behind him, the big tall figure in the green and in the orange and blue and white of Rabobank is Lars Bohm, former cyclocross world champion, and he's riding his cross bike, so he's no stranger to this. All about bike handling as well. The sector 18 with 100 kilometres to go, just over at Sur Achelion. And our breakaway riders of Van Kielsbroek, Popovic, De Haas, Verschulen, Lindemann, Boucher, Morkov, Vellieux, Mongel, Klemmer, Saramontins and Janglashik of Germany. They're all in this section now. 3 minutes 21 is the gap. Beginning to get a bit more exciting behind. They're beginning to push it back together. Has been one crash where somebody just tipped themselves over on the banking. And it's a technique sometimes, isn't it, Sean? If you can't get around somebody, they use it almost like a mountain bike berm. Up on the side, down again in front of somebody else. But I think in this occasion, the rider from Radio Shack Nissan just got caught out and walloped down he goes.
The banking was too steep.
The banking was too steep, indeed.
Yes, and it's caused a lot of problems here. We can see there just moments ago, Posato is in a group who's chasing to get back on. And I think the peloton is in 3 groups at the moment, and it is started to up the pace a bit. And a lot of the teams know that some of the riders are cut out. They're a little bit off the rear in another group, and they up the pace just to put them under a bit of pressure, maybe put them into a bit of a panic situation. So at the moment, we've just seen there the groups. There were not much between the 3 groups which were on the road, and we have the break, of course, out front, but the main peloton seems to be broken in three groups, but not a great gap. I think about 15 seconds between each group, so it should all come back together again. But it definitely have, I think, speeded up a bit, because the gap is coming down 3:10 at the moment, where it was hovering, over the 4 minutes. I think 4:10 was the advantage. I think the maximum advantage we had in the earlier part of the day when we went on to the first sections of cobbles.
Let's have a look at then who are the big favourites here, Sean, for today's race, because last week's Tour of Flanders changed everything. Changed absolutely everything when you look at the Spring Classics. Fabian Cancellara was coming in fantastic form. His luck ran out. He'd had crashes and punctures in the Harelbeke race, one crash in a very similar circumstance in the feed area, and now Fabian Cancellara is out of the picture. Tom Bonin, the big favourite, his main rival, and it opens up the race to so many different possibilities, completely different this year.
Yes, well, it makes the race better or easier, let's call it, for some teams and for some riders. Other ones would prefer it with Cancellara. For Tom Bonin, for example, I think it plays into Tom Bonin's hands to win this race. He's a better opportunity than if we had Cancellara here. There's no denying that, because Cancellara was in such great shape. We see him coming into the Tour of Flanders. But for the likes of Ballan, he would like Cancellara here to make the race really difficult, because he wants to break it up and not come to a sprint.
Welcome back. Just a shade over 100 kilometres to go. Tom Bonin in the second group on the road here, not outside of the break group, the second main group on the road. He was clearly held up by that crash earlier, along with Martin Talingi we'd seen, and Lars Bohm was in there as well, just making sure that they're getting back up to this group. BMC has been setting tempo on the front. Alessandro Ballan we were talking about. Let's go through the rest of the major favourites. Ballan, third last week in the Tour of Flanders. It came to a sprint. He did what he had to do in terms of he gave it a 2 or 3 attacks in the last kilometre or so. Maybe he didn't have the legs, Sean. They didn't look totally 100% massive attacks, but he had a go anyway. Ballan's chances here?
Well, I think Ballan is in a more difficult situation today, and he said that also in the interviews I was reading in the French papers. He prefers the Tour of Flanders. And as I said just before we had our break there, I think he would like to have a rider like Cancellara here, who would make the race really difficult on the cobbles in the final part of the race, and that's what Ballan needs. Where today, you know, he's going to have to do a lot of the work himself, because he has to try and get away on his own if he have a chance of winning this. Because if he arrives in the finish with the likes of Tom Bonen, with Pozzato, you know, he has no chance in the sprint of taking it. So that's it's a difficult situation for Ballan, but you just never know in the end, you know, what way the race works out. He's certainly in good form, and that is the most important thing, and the morale will be really high after his performance, because he did attack a lot last week, but you know, Bonen had him covered every time in that final number of kilometres. He was on him immediately, and he never got any sort of an advantage at all.
What about Filippo Pozzato then? People Pozzato. Keep a look out for his helmet, by the way. He's got a little sticker on it with a picture of Franco Ballerini on it. So Merci Ballet on it, which I noticed today, as in sort of honour of the late Franco Ballerini, who won this race, of course, and was the Italian national coach. A very popular man in Italy amongst the riders anyway, and he was killed in a rallying accident. He was co-driver, I think, in a rally car, but near his home a couple of years ago. So look out for that on his helmet. But People Pozzato, I thought he looked the strongest, you know, last week in Tour of Flanders, Sean, but he could get the measure of Bonen in the last few metres. Did he leave it too late? Because Bonen's obviously got slightly better, or a better sprint, but Pozzato can sprint. Did he just leave it too late?
Well, I think if you look back at the sprint, Ballan, he attacked, or he went into the sprint quite early with Bonen in his wheel and Pozzato in the wheel of Tom Bonen. So for Tom Bonen, he had a lead out as such from Ballan, and then he just took it up at about, you know, 180, 200 metres out, and that was the perfect position and the perfect running for Tom Bonen. And when Bonen takes it up, of course, he is very powerful. Pozzato stayed in the wheel and, you know, did not really look like he was going to challenge him at all. I think Pozzato, he just played the card in that final kilometres of Flanders, leave Bonen do all the chasing if Ballan attacked, and that was the case, and then try everything in the sprint, but he just wasn't good enough in the sprint to really give Bonen a big challenge.
There is Filippo Pozzato moving up towards the front of this group. Also Greipel going around the outside as well. Tom Bonen. This is the group of big favourites who are making their way back up towards the front. They were split after a crash on the side of the road. Just people being held up and getting bikes all over the place and picking pedals out of spokes. Ian Stannard also in that group. That's another man who I hope could do a ride today. Stannard is so strong. Really strong. And just waving the flag for the UK there for a minute. Hey, wondered why he was moving up around the outside. Andre Greipel. Well, that's a long way to go out for Andre Greipel. 97 kilometres. Not quite sure what he's about, but there we are. He's gone ahead unless he has some particular reason. And the big German sprinter getting across. I think he's just trying to make across to the front group just in case, maybe, Sean.
Well, to make it across the front group to over 2.5 minutes is going to be, you know, a big effort, and that sort of effort, you know, you pay. I think you pay more for it in the end. We're coming to the point, of course. through the Arenberg. I think a lot of riders will be thinking of that, and if you're concerned about getting across that section, maybe try and get a little bit ahead of the main peloton, but you have to make the calculation also. The effort you're going to make, you're going to pay for that in the final, and if you get pulled back before we get to Arenberg, well, then you're definitely going to pay for it. But some riders are so nervous of the Arenberg section that they try and get away, and I'm surprised that Greipel is doing it, because he's a rider. He's a big, powerful sprinter, a strong rider. He should be, if he's on form at all, he should be able to stay up at this stage of the race. In the very final, it's a different. It will be a different case, but I think he's just knocked off his effort here for some reason.
Yep.
It looked like he was giving it a good go, and he took off at the front of the bunch in the beginning.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what he was about, but maybe he was just testing to see what people were doing. This is BMC riding on the front of this group now. BMC, we talked about Alessandro Ballan. Hincapie was going well last weekend, helping out Ballan. Maybe he's sort of setting records all over the place now, Hincapie, as being a rider who's been around for a long time, riding lots and lots of different editions of races. Thor Hushovd, former world champion, has challenged for this race many times. He must only be a very dark horse here, because I know some American colleagues, or American television station colleagues, it's Paul Show and Phil Diggett doing the commentaries, having Thor Hushovd as an outsider here, Sean. I can't see that happening somehow. He wasn't going well last week.
No, not going well last week, and we've seen Thor Hushovd in the past not going well, maybe in the earlier semi-classics, but still coming in pretty good shape at the Tour of Flanders time, and then putting in a good performance in Paris Roubaix. This year hasn't been the case. I think he's a little bit further off in his form, and in the Tour of Flanders last week, I would reckon he was disappointed with his performance, but he can come round very quickly. We could see him there. We should see him there in the final today, but I think to be up there and to challenge for the win, I would be surprised if we will see him doing that.
I think it'll be just a little bit too much for him. The other star, of course, of BMC, the other classic star, Philippe Gilbert, is really trying to get himself together for the Ardennes Classics. That starts after these. These are the Flemish cobble classics, and they're different riders generally different riders who ride these to the Ardennes Classics, because the Ardennes Classics favour guys who are a little bit more all-rounders. They can climb a bit better, perhaps. Some of these guys can power up short slopes, like on the Tour of Flanders, but they find it a bit more difficult with races like Liège-Bastogne-Liège or Amstel Gold or something very similar. So they're different types of riders. People are already riding and going, where's Philippe Gilbert? Well, he's not really as suited to these as perhaps the Ardennes Classics. He's also, remember, a Walloon, which means he's a French-speaking Belgian, and the races on that side of the country in the Ardennes are more important to him than others. There's Edvald Bosenhagen. You can't ride every single race. There are riders, however, who have won races in all conditions. Sean being one of them, sitting next to me. Sean, it is very unusual, though, isn't it, especially in the more specialised age now, to have riders who can win a cobble classic like Tour of Flanders or Paris Roubaix, and then go on and win Amstel Gold, Liège-Bastogne-Liège or Flèche Wallonne.
Yes, well, it's got more specialised, and for the classics, the cobble classics, the Ardennes Classics, you see different riders winning them now. It's rare that you see a rider winning a Tour of Flanders or Paris Roubaix and then going on to win a Liège-Bastogne-Liège or an Amstel Gold race, and that is just a change of the times. In the mid-80s, when we had Bernardino, we had Laurent Fignon, they were all contesting, Eno contesting for Paris Roubaix, not many times, but certainly Laurent Fignon did, and then he was there very much in the Ardennes Classic, more in the Ardennes Classic. I did it myself. I won a Paris Roubaix, won Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and that is the change of the times, really, because now the level, I think, is that much higher. They race so more aggressively in the earlier part of the race. If you look at today's race, in the first 2 hours, 47 average in the first 2 hours of racing. That is amazing. An amazing speed they go when you look at the distance of 257 and over 50 kilometres of cobbles. And that's all because, the riders, they just prepare specifically for those style of races.
Sylvain Chavanel, the French champion at the back, an outsider very much so in terms of a good outside bet Bonin is the big favourite. That gives a little advantage and disadvantages to other riders. It's a fantastic sport, this. I mean, it really is unbelievably complex and subtle, and changes with every pedal stroke. The tactic has to change all the time. Tom Bonin is the big favourite for this race. All eyes will be on him, and that means that Sylvain Chavanel, as the French champion, riding for Omega Pharma Quick-Step's got to work to help his team leader Tom Bonin, as has the man from the Netherlands who's been going really well, Nicky Terpstra, and the rest of the team have. But you know, if something happens to Tom Bonin, Chavanel then is free to do other things. It just becomes an instant change. Chavanel may well have be fired up the road at some point, so other teams have to chase him down, and Bonin gets an easier ride towards the finish because he's a marked man. Every other team will have to go after Chavanel because they know he's capable of winning something like this. It's an immensely subtle game, this, Sean, isn't it? Every metre that they cover on the road, things can change.
Yes, well, there's a lot of tactics, you know, within the teams, different tactics, different style of teams, and with Omega Quick-Step, you know, the first thing today, I think, would have been if there's a breakaway, guys, 8 or 10 riders, you have to have one rider in it, and they've done that with Casebolt, so that's covered. Now, as we go into the first maybe important part, where we go to, you know, Wallers at 94 kilometres, so you know, we're getting close to that, and that's where, you know, a lot of action will happen. And after that, that is the point where we see last year a lot of teams starting, you know, to try and get riders into the breakaway, and we could see exactly the same situation today when we get through Wallers and Arenberg. Then, you know, the teams will start looking at who's up front, who's in the leading group, how many riders are there. All that tactic will be calculated very quickly at that point, and that's where we could see the likes of Chavanel getting into a breakaway and getting up the road, and he's going to be under orders, you know, just stay in the breakaway, contribute a little bit, but don't give it 100%, and see what happens behind. But if Bonin gets into a problem mechanical and he's not really in a position, well, then we could see the likes of Chavanel getting his chance and staying out front, but that is something I think we have to get through Wallers and Arenberg before we'll see any of that tactic coming into action.
It's flat, and a bit more flat, this race, frankly. And the gearing on this, something like a 46, 50, 40, something like that, Sean?
Well, 44, 45 in a ring, and then, you know, the block is pretty standard that you would use, a 12.23 or something in that bracket, but it's just the inside ring that you change. You put on a bigger ring. Normally those guys in normal road racing is a 39er ring. 44, 45 I think would be the norm for today.
And they tend to knock a tooth off the big one as well, something like 52 rather than a 53. Tom Bonin is the man that is being marked by everybody back in the group. 2:51 is the gap, and Gert Steegmans now takes up the pace setting on the front. This is the most magnificent of hard men races. Why did we mention John Stablinski a little earlier? And the fact that there are men in the group a little bit like him now, loyal lieutenants like Jaroslav Popovic, who've done things and won races in their own time. Stablinski, possibly a slightly harder and better all-round rider than Jaroslav Popovic, but Stablinski was a minor in this area, in the Arenberg area. So many of these Flandrian riders, the Flemish guys, they got out of an industrial or agricultural background just to get the hell out of it, frankly. And a bike was used as a way forward in life, not just as a sport and not just as a way of getting into some fresh air, but as a way to better themselves. Very much like boxing was in maybe in the United States. But the whole of Northern Europe have been... they've had this great tradition. Look at the way those chain bounces up and down all over the place. And there's only one real technique for riding these cobbles, Sean, isn't there? And it is?
Plenty of power.
Hit it as hard as possible. Well worth saying at that particular time, because we're coming up to the Arenberg Trench, the most famous section of cobbles here on the Paris Roubaix race. Not necessarily the deciding one, but it's certainly where we see the big action starting, Sean. And if you speak to any of our colleagues and the guys who won this race, Magnus Backstedt, for example, who won this race for Sweden quite a long time ago now, but a big rider and a good lead-out man, and did quite a lot of good sprinting in his time as well. But Backstedt winning in 2004, the race was just slightly longer then than it was this edition, at 261 kilometres. But he said you get into the Arenberg and it's like a lead out for a sprint, Sean. You're going absolutely flat out.
Yes, it's exactly the same as a sprint. Everybody wants to be up in the front, 25 riders, and it just goes faster and faster as you get to the Arenberg section. So it's exactly the same as a sprint, and we can see on the front end of the bunch the Omega Quick-Step riders, Stigman's appearing there, and it's the first moment where you have to, be careful in the race. You have to make sure your leader is in a good position. It's not a place where I suppose you can win the race, but you can certainly lose in Arenberg. And to get through this section, in a good position, that is very important for the likes of Bone. They're doing a very good job, and we haven't seen Quick-Step doing anything until this moment. We have seen Sky doing a lot of pulling, we have seen BMC doing a lot of pulling earlier on, but it's really at this moment that you have to be in control of the situation on the front end of the main bunch.
And here we go, the pace is being upped now. Under 100 kilometres, we're under 90 kilometres to go now to the finish. It just runs out of time. It's so much to talk about in this race. It's a fascinating race with a marvellous history. The very first winner, Josef Fischer, in 1896. The German rider taking the victory then. Then there was two riders by an Italian at the time. He was Italian at the time, Maurice Garin, who became a naturalised Frenchman in 1901 and went on to win the first Tour de France for France in 1903, was Italian at the time. 1897, 1898. See, there's nothing new under the sun. Pinch a rider from somewhere else, why don't you? Anyway, Maurice Garin won the next two. And everybody who's anybody has won this race at some point or other. Rick van Steenbergen won a couple of editions, 1948, 1952. Really huge names have won this. George Claas won two back-to-back, 46 and 47. Louison Bobet won in 1956. There's a wonderful picture of Bobet in the cafe opposite us here in the Velodrome, raising his arms. Bobet not looking like a sort of rider who would really have won this sort of race, but showing how tough he really was. Interestingly, in his hometown, there's a little museum to him if you ever get there. I shall remember the name of the town in a minute, or the village over in Brittany. The rider getting tailed off the back there is Jurrit Zagen, the older brother of Peter Zagen. Peter Zagen not riding here today, for all those people who said, where's Peter Zagen? He's not here today. The man with the biggest, most impressive palmares in this race is Roger de Vlamingh. Roger de Vlamingh won in 72, 74, 75 and 1977. Tom Bonan could equal that today. Welcome back. 86.9 kilometres to go. Two-time winner of Paris-Roubaix sitting next to me, Sean Kelly. 3 times a winner was Johan Museu. Johan van Summeren is the defending champion, riding for Garmin Barracuda. They are notable from their absence at the front here at the moment. Fair enough. Doing another job, or waiting at the moment. It's BMC and Sky who've been doing the pulling on the front of the peloton at the moment. The oldest ever winner of this race, Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle, was 39 years of age back in 1993 when he won this. The following year was won by André Schmiel, at the time the only Moldovan rider to win. There are the mines of Arenberg, where Jean Stablinski spent his youth under the ground and the rest of his youth trying to escape from it. Stablinski never won this race. And he would have dearly loved to, but the Arenberg Trench is rapidly approaching. And what's the nature of the Arenberg itself, Sean? When you ride, when you hit it, what's the first thing you notice about it? Just talk us through it.
Well, I think the most scary thing is getting onto it, and if you're out front in a group, as we have 12 riders here, it's a perfect situation to be in. You know, there's a little bit of calm going onto it. You ride onto it at a much more casual pace than they will back in the peloton, because they come onto it at 55-60 kilometers per hour, and it's a little bit downhill. So, you know, when you come onto the covers, that's rate, it's very scary. The conditions today are dry, so, you know, that's a little bit more safe. But when it's wet, it's just such a scary place to be. And I think everybody is scared. If anybody tell you out there they're not scared, I think they're telling lies, because you have to be the way everybody is pushing proposition. And you know, then the Arenberg is it's a very, very difficult section. It's a long section, 2.4 kilometers, and the cobbles are very, very bad. So to get through, you have to make a big effort. And everybody is nervous. It's the point where the real nervousness starts coming into this, because they all want to get through back in the peloton. Everybody is nervous that they're going to be crashes, they're going to get caught up, they'll be behind coming out of the Arenberg and then having to chase. And at this point, you definitely do not want to have a chase of 10, 15, 20 kilometers. So that just, you know, is a recipe for nervousness, and it's a real important part as we see the breakaway they go on to it at the moment.
This is the Arenberg then, and look at the way they've got it all barriered now. It was until fairly... Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Oh, huge crash in the breakaway. Oh no. And immediately riders going down on the left-hand side of your screen. It's the rider from NetApp, loses control in the centre. The young man, Grisha Janashik. He takes down the Van Kielsbroek, goes down, and on the far right-hand side, I think it's the rider from Lotto, Kenny de Haas, who's gone down as well. That is a massive crash. And it just goes to show how incredibly difficult. And there's been a lot of moss in the middle of this section. They're riding on the crown of the road, a lot of moss in this, and they did think about taking it out of the race, Sean. That is not a good sign.
No, it's not a good sign. You know, he started to slide a bit. We could see his front started to slide a bit. Then he corrected it, and when it went the other way, it is slippery there. And you know, you would think with the dry conditions it would be good there, but it's still quite slippery. And if you panic a bit at all when you start to slide, if you try to correct it too quickly, that's where you can get it totally wrong. And that was a big one there for a number of riders. And again, at that point, you are going to a very fast race, and it's real pleasant to see now in the bunch, you know, how they will fare out, because it's a bit more slippery than I had expected to be.
That was slippery. That was definitely slippery. Didn't look like a huge mistake by the man from NetApp. It just looked as if maybe a little bit of inexperience, but on riding cobbles at this level. But the front wheel went away from him, and when the front wheel goes away, there ain't no way back, folks. And he went crashing down, took a whole load of other people with him. Kenny de Haas on the left-hand side of the road, on the right-hand side of the road, and Van Kielsbroek went straight over the top of him. Oh, here we come towards the Arenberg trench. Hearts in mouths time now. Fingers crossed, toes crossed, everything crossed. They're going to hit this at 55 kilometers an hour, just like a sprint. Over the top of the railway crossing. 5 stars. Oh, okay. Nail biting now as Quickstep get to the front and push the pace along. They've buried it now after many years of having it open, or historically having it open, and you can get up the outside of it straight away. But these are the rest of the breakaway riders further on up. The man who's leading them across at the moment looks like Frederick Vacholen. The peloton at the moment, all bid on in the middle of the road. That's not good either. If they jump out all over the place, I think only one team, Radio Shack Nissan, are using carbon fiber or plastic bottle cages. Everybody else has got metal bottle cages because you can bend them. You can bend them really tight and get the bottle in, and it won't bounce out. If they bounce out in these sections, it can be absolutely deadly. A Quickstep controlling the pace, Sean. They're not going massively fast. Van Kielsbroek is up again, but he's going to be passed. And there is the man from NetApp. And all sorts of problems at the back. We do get mechanicals right, left and centre. Look like Genet who's in trouble there.
Benati from Radio Shack.
And several riders losing their chains by the look of it. bouncing off here, and Sylvain Chavanel gets on the front. Look how rough the cobbles are. You can see them, and there's masses of moss between each one. So far so good, Sean, in terms of crashes anyway. That's the good thing.
Yes, they've got through quite well, because the front end of the bunch, we can see, it's starting to stretch out now. It's the first couple of 100 metres when you arrive at that real fast speed. They are very much grouped together. As we go further on through the Arenberg, then it just gets stretched out and there's a little bit more space. We can see Omega Quickstep doing a very good job. They're in control, a number of men up front here, and it looks like that everybody is getting through without any problem in the main bunch.
A few riders being tailed off at the back here, not enjoying their run over this. That's Ted King, former rider for Garmin. Sylvain Chavanel is now beginning to force the pace on the front here, bouncing around on those cobblestones. 27 or 28 mil tubs. Problem for Hincapie, apparently. Race Radio is saying a problem for George Hincapie. Bosenhagen out of trouble, Eisel out of trouble, Lars Bohm not even troubled by this at all, just rolling along over the top. Stuart O'Grady goes through our shot. And Luca Paolini grabbing the bars, trying to get over. Most of them riding on the tops, not on the hoods. Further down this section, people being spread out all over the place, but it's Sylvain Chavanel driving the pace along for Omega Pharma Quickstep here. They're trying to isolate any of the other favourites who might be on the tail of Tom Bonen. Not much to be seen of Pipo Pozzato at the moment.
No, nothing of Pozzato, but there's a lot of the favourites in here, and I think Omega Pharma Quickstep just keeping the pace high here, with Chavanel just keeping it going here. Get through this section and get Tom Bowen especially through, and get through as many riders as possible, and then have a look at the situation when you get out of the Arenberg section.
They come out of the Arenberg very shortly. Look at Chavanel drives onto the tarmac now. And there will be a big sigh of relief from a lot of the riders having got through that. People being picked up now by the main group. There's a feed station directly after the Arenberg. I sometimes wonder whether they shouldn't pull it back just a little bit, because some of these guys are just thankful to get through, Sean, aren't they? And let alone think about grabbing a bottle on the way through. 80 kilometers to go. 1:44 now is the gap, and a big crash in the break involving Grisha Janosch of Team NetApp, and also going down very hard indeed his compatriots Guillem van Keelsbulk from the breakaway and Kenny de Haas on opposite sides of the road, but it just set up that sort of reaction. Luckily the rest of the peloton, it seems, getting through. A couple of mechanicals, some chains coming off, maybe a puncture or two, but everybody staying upright, thank goodness. Michael Morkov in the break, and these guys are well aware they've lost a number of their riders now. 1:46 is the gap. Dirk de Mol won this race back in 1988 from a breakaway when everybody looked around them and didn't chase him down. Welcome back. Well, it's all kicking off here, I'm afraid. It's Gregory Rast, Andre Greipel and George Hincapie out of the leading group now. Think about the breakaway we're looking at now, but the leading group of chasers with mechanicals. Now Hincapie had a puncture. Greipel and Rast, we're not sure why they're out of the group now, but there's only about 35 driven on by Quickstep at the moment. Race Radio are having 60, but we've just seen a shot of about, 35 riders? No more. It's getting very serious now, though, Sean. Some of these riders in the break are thinking, well, we've got to push on to see if we can stay away. This is Sarah Montins.
And this is the occasion now for the breakaway. I think we have 8 riders left out of our 12-man breakaway. because of the big crash we had there in the Arenberg. But we can see on the front end of that bunch, 35-40 riders, they're starting to attack. We have a Francaise Lejoux and an AG2R rider trying to pull out, and I think we will see more of that. If the pace drops in that group of big favourites, well, then we will see a lot of riders trying to attack. And for our leaders out front, I think it's the opportunity now for them to pull out of an advantage again. The peloton, they probably settled down, because as we came to the Arenberg section, there was a lot of action back in the bunch, and the advantage for our breakaway came down a lot. But it will all depend now what the tactic in the bunch will be of the teams, and if they take a little bit of downtime, the breakaway should pull away again. But I feel that there will be a lot of teams here saying, careful now guys, this is the moment. If there's some attacks you have to be with, because they could a breakaway go, as was the situation last year when Van Summeren went away. It was around this time that the breakaway pulled away from the group of big favourites.
At Sky, who are doing the work on the front, they have 2 or 3 riders who could do really well. A very, very strong team. Juan Antonio Fletcher, of course, has tried his hand on many occasions here in the Paris Roubaix when he started off, of course, with Banesto, and then with Rabobank, and then of course now with Sky. They have Bernard Eisel, who's doing a lot of work on the front here. Again, somebody who could do really well if the wheels fall off the trolley for Juan Antonio Fletcher. Ian Stannard, he's due a big one, and he's so strong. Reminds me of a sort of Marc Demare rider who just goes on forever. 140 the gap for our breakaway riders over the chasing group now, which is about 35 to 40 strong. They are down to 14 sections to go. There is Alessandro Ballan in that chasing group, sitting behind, I think, Lars Bohm, is it not? Maybe not. No. Certainly not on a cross bike, so that won't be Lars Bohm. 1 minute and 34 seconds. Problems for Hincapie with a puncture. Greipel and Gregory Rust, who was 4th, I think, remember last year. Not good. So Radio Shack, Nissan, Lotto Belisol and BMC with problems at the moment. Welcome to Paris Roubaix live here. This is the chasing group, 136 down on the breakaway at the moment. They've been through the Arenberg trench, and boy oh boy, the carnage in the breakaway was unbelievable. Young German rider Grisha Janoschke went down, just lost control of the front wheel about, 50 metres, 60 metres into the Arenberg. It's quite mossy in there. They did think about taking it out, but he went down, and over the top of him went Guillaume van Kelsbroek of the Omega Pharma Quick-Step team, right onto the cobbles, onto his shoulder. On the other side of the road, trying to avoid it, Kenny de Haas of the Lotto Belisol team, wallop right down. And then when the Quick-Steps hit the Arenberg trench, they pulled out a long line of riders. Race Radio had it about 60 who've got out the other side without any problems, but we make it a bit less looking at it. And Quick-Step, Omega Pharma Quick-Step hoping to sort of drive this one on along. But BMC have had one problem. One of their key men, one of their key left-handers, has had a puncture in the Arenberg and are now struggling to get back on because the pace is going to be high all the way now. George Hincapie, also Andre Greipel, the leader of the Lotto Belisol team. He had a puncture, we think. Gregory Rast last year, right up there, just off the podium. The Nissan Radio Shack rider has gone as well off the front group because of a puncture. Now this is a significant move here, Sean, because we've got the former world champion and former winner of the Tour of Flanders, Alessandro Ballan, with Juan Antonio Fletcher and Bram Tankink in this group from Rabobank. They've joined 2 riders, one from Francis de Jeux, one from Jimmy Casper is the rider from the AG2R Le Mondial team, and could go really well. Sebastian Turgot for Europcar has got in that group as well, and it looks like Ladagnew is the rider from Francis Dujeux, Big Matt, but there's two big names in there, Sean, and they will not want to let them go, and they're now going to have to chase.
Yes, well, it's going to be a situation now for Omega Pharma Quickstep. They have to, take control, not allow this group of Fletcher, Ballan, who are two danger men. Although Fletcher, he's coming back from an injury, so he hasn't a lot of racing done. He could have difficulty in the end, in the final 30 kilometres. This one could be a bit difficult for him, but we all know Ballan, he's in top shape, and here we are, Omega Quickstep just taking it up. They're not going to allow this one to get too far out, because if you're allowed to get a minute and a half, 2 minutes out, well then, everybody's going to say, well, it's a big gap now, who's going to close it down, and you get into a situation all teams start looking at each other. So I don't think they want to get into that situation, and surprising they haven't thrown somebody up here. As we talked about in the earlier part of our programme, it would be a perfect situation for Chavanel, as we see more riders sliding out here on this corner.
Oh dear, Farnese Vini losing grip on the outside. Riders or teams that have missed this break, or the little break, Garmin Barracuda with Heinrich Hausler on the front here, have missed, as have Omega Pharma Quickstep. They just have to bide their time and wait and be very careful. This is the group itself, the breakaway itself, that's still persisting along the head of the race. Behind them now, there are a group of significant riders: Juan Antonio Fletcher, Bram Tankink from Rabobank, Alessandro Ballan. So Fletcher and Ballan are the two really big names in the group that's now trying to get away from the main peloton. Sebastian Turgot is in there for Team Europcar. Jimmy Casper, the ever-present Jimmy Casper, super strong. On his day, a terrifically good rider, Jimmy Casper. And it's a dangerous move for them. This is section 14. Tilloy to Sa et Rosière. Medium difficulty stage, 2.5 kilometres or there, just under, and they've done 185 kilometres of this race, 73 still to go. The break's going well, Sean, it's going quite well.
Yes, they're still working away, but the advantage that they've got, it's not good enough to get anywhere into the final of this race. Not, no. They need to have 5 minutes plus here, because they've been out for a long time, and they're going to start tiring as we go further on into the race. The interesting thing will be now with the group of Fletcher, Ballan, Casper, Turgot. Will there be other riders try to get across? For the moment, it looks like that Omega Pharma Quickstep are keeping the pace high. Will they close it down immediately? If not, we could see some other teams starting to catapult riders off the front of the bunch and trying also to get away, because this is the point. The riders who feel when they get into the final, the last 25-30 kilometres, that they're not going to be up to it when the big teams and the big riders start really pushing it on. They are going to go for the tactic of trying to get out of the main bunch. As we can see, more riders getting back into that group of big favourites, so that tells us the pace has slowed down a little bit.
Maybe they thought that some other riders would come with them. They didn't look fully committed, did they, the riders at the front? Ballan and Tankink just sitting there riding tempo. And at the moment, it's Omega Pharma Quickstep are trying to push the pace along here, with Sylvain Chavanel just sitting behind Stan Vandenberg. And they're pushing on. And there is Tom Bonen in the middle of your shot, the overwhelming favourite for this race.
O'Grady.
And O'Grady just ahead of him. O'Grady is a rider who's been freed from the responsibilities he's had of many years. I think this is probably the first time we've seen him in the race as undoubted team leader, Sean.
Well, of course,
he's won it, of course.
In the past, he's won it, but he's been in a team where you have such a big favourite in Cancellara. He's always been there as a domestique. When he did win it, it was a breakaway again, a situation where he found himself out front. But today, I think he will be a much freer man, and he will be able to ride his own race. It'll be interesting to see what sort of performance he can put in here today. It will also depend on the team, what other riders they have in the final. So, as the race go on, the tactic can change so much in this one.
52 seconds, under a minute for our remaining breakaway riders. 71.5 kilometers to go. For those of you who joined us on British Eurosport, you were with the podiums at the World Track Championships in Melbourne, which I've enjoyed doing this week with Tony Gibb. The Arenberg Trench has, as per usual, seen the big gun starting to fire off, but we had a bit of problems with the breakaway riders as they hit with about a 1.5 minute advantage. Grisha Janoschke, the German. This is Hincapie coming back through the cars and onto the back of the peloton, having had a puncture. Working hard to get back up there. He's had some bad luck of his own in the past in this race. Remember his steerer tube. His steerer tube snapped one year. There's Greipel. He too had a puncture, and it looks a crash by the look of it as well there on the left-hand side of his elbow. He didn't have that earlier. He went up the road slightly for a while, but he's now fighting to get back on. A number of riders being held up by mechanicals. Yes, in the Arenberg Trench, the breakaway went in with about 1:40 actually advantage. Grisha Janoschke, the German rider for NetApp, just lost the front wheel after about 50-60 meters into it, slipping and sliding on the moss that covers some of those huge cobbled sets in there. Very, very rough. He went down like a sack of spuds, taking Guillaume van Kelsbroek over the top of him, who crashed onto his shoulder on the other side of the road, trying to avoid those two. Down went Kenny de Haas of Lotto Belisol, got up. The rest of them piled through the middle, through the gap left through the middle, and carried on up the road. They've got 46 seconds of an advantage. All of those guys, as we understand, getting back up. We saw Grisha Janoschke, we thought we did, from NetApp. It could have been one of the other NetApp boys, to be frank, because I don't think many of them have too much experience on this, although they were here last year. The back end of the Arenberg Trench, some significant riders trying to push on and keep the pace high. Juan Antonio Fletcher, Alessandro Balan, Bram Tanking, Jimmy Casper, Sebastian Turgot, Mathieu Ladagnu, and really not super fully committing to it. These are riders trying to make it back through the group. Hincapie, he's almost upon it, but it's so difficult. There's a Sylvain Chavanel, the sort of joker in the pack really for the Omega Pharma Quick Step team. Right, for those of you who are interested, Junior Paris-Roubaix has been on as well. The Junior Paris-Roubaix results, the provisional results, if you want to hear them, was won by the Dane Mads Schmidt. Mads Schmidt taking the win. He had almost a minute over Anthony Turgis, the French rider. Britain's Jonathan Dibben, a fine third place, so a bronze medal place for him. And that is the 1-2-3 provisional for the Junior Paris-Roubaix race, won before by some Brits as well, remember. Andy Fenn won the Junior Paris-Roubaix. Mads Schmidt of Denmark wins by 56 seconds over Anthony Turgis of France and Jonathan Dibben. Coming in, there was also Martin Ottinkar, Marcus Holgaard and Joachim van Reyten, all came in at 56. There was a sprint for that, which Turgis won ahead of Dibben. But that was a fine ride by Mads Schmidt then, riding away from everybody else. In Junior Paris-Roubaix, whoops, that's what we see a lot. So difficult to regain the group, Sean, once they start going on this stuff. And Hincapie having a real problem trying to make up the ground to get back onto the group.
Yes, it was a long chase to get back in there, and we could see him, with a rider from Omega Pharma Quick Step, and he certainly wasn't going to, contribute a lot to get back in. So, Big George, a big effort to get back in there, and that's why you pay dearly in the final for that sort of effort, and something you try and not, get into. But the Arenberg is a place where you see so many punctures, and this year, surprisingly, out of the bunch, we heard there was 3 the favourites, so not a huge amount of punctures compared to other years. And when you look at the very bad section of cobbles it is.
Fingers crossed. And look at the roughness of these cobbles. Only way to ride is on the centre line here. This is the group. It's Martin Wijnands. I thought it was Tanking. Wijnands of Rabobank, the Belgian rider. This is the group that made a move to try and get away. So we have Wijnands in for Tanking, but all the rest are okay. Wijnands has been in pretty good form, actually. Haven't got much of an advantage. They're keeping the pace rolling, Sean, but they're having to work behind to catch them. Yes,
the pace is quite high in the main bunch of favourites. We can see there, a long line of riders, and it's Gert Steegmans who is, keeping the pace very high, and Chavanel taking it up here. So they are concerned with that group of Fletcher, Ballan, Wijnands, Casper. They're not, not hanging about and allowing it to, get any substantial advantage, and they cannot afford to do that. We can see they're just about coming back on this group of 6 riders.
Yep, and they're going to keep driving along as well. Straight around the outside, past Martin Wijnands, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 riders make the junction. Fletcher gets in there. The group is now, what, 12, 13 riders here. Van Sommeren in there, in the middle for Garmin Barracuda, and they've made a significant gap. People Pozzato is the man who's missing out here, Sean. Once again, he's not got into that front group. He's has Stuart O'Grady here.
I think a lot of favourites.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of people have messed out here.
Has found themselves in a difficult situation here. We can see there's a lot of small groups here. That's the effort put in by Gert Steegmans. I think it broke the bunch a lot into many smaller groups, and we could see Tom Bourne up front there. We could see Paulini was there. Chavanel is up there, and they're having a look around there. Just a moment ago, we see Bourne looking about. It would be interesting to see exactly who of the other favourites is up there, and if they push it on, because it is a group of about 15 plus riders, and it's a one. If they're prepared to work together, well, then it could be a one difficult to pull back. O'Shuft and Sommeren.
Yep, try working together. Yep, Bonan. All try working together. There's let's keep this group moving. But some riders in that group not concerned to do so, Sean. Hushoft is in there, but we've already seen Ballan go up the road. Are they likely to just sort of play the game where they wait? We shall see. 66.5 kilometers to go. They're going through the feed zone. They have to be very careful.
Bad time for it.
Welcome back. The pressure is really coming on here. Look, Sylvain Chavanel just zipping out of the leading group of riders, trying to force the place along. That's quite a concerted effort by Chavanel to get away, and he's taken a number of riders with him. But right at this point, live, we're just looking at what was happening when we're on the break. Right at this point live, Chavanel is still trying to push on a little bit. He's eased back somewhat to the back of the group here. They're in sector 13, and Chavanel sitting on the back of a group of 4 now. There's the cyclocross bikes in action as we move into section 13, Beauvray-la-Forêt to Orchy. And Turgot, Sebastian Turgot, once again inside, deciding to go. Looking very strong indeed at the front. A lot of riders beginning to suffer. Michael Morkov at the back for Saxo Bank, who's been in the break all day. And now it's a case of just hanging on while you can. There is Chavanel not doing any work behind Sean, because he knows that he just has to stay in that group now just to be the safety.
Well, that's to stay in the group. It's always you have to stay in a group, and just see what's happening out front. But I think, as we know in bike racing, in the group is the place to be, although on the cobble sections it's always a little bit more difficult to stay in the wheel. But then when you come off onto the normal road, it's a huge advantage to be in the group and in the to get carried along. But we can see up front here that Chavanel is he's the man who is doing a good move at the moment, trying to get out of the group. We could see there just before we went to our ad break, we had a group with Bonan and a number of the other favourites. They were starting to look at each other, and immediately Chavanel went in the attack, and he's taken a number of riders with him here. And this is the moment to try and do that for Chavanel. And I think within Omega Quickstep, they know that everybody is waiting for them to take control of the race. They're all looking at Bonan, and Chavanel just, it jumps on the opportunity.
Yeah, it's a good thing for Chavanel to do. Just get away. Seb van Mark at the back of this group. We haven't mentioned Seb van Mark at all. He's not really shown his hand whatsoever so far, as Sebastian Tergo gets joined by the other 5 riders in this group. Chavanel by easily the smallest of the riders. And just sitting up and taking the break. Ladagnou from Francis de Jeux says, well, we don't want to knock off the pace. There's 2 other riders try and get across as quickly as they possibly can. These are the 2 riders chasing at the moment. It's Edwig Kammerts, the Belgian rider from Cofidis, and got with him Martin Tjallingi, one of my outside bets today for a place. We were talking about it on the way in, and I said Tjallingi for a podium place, but you didn't quite agree, Sean. Tjallingi not necessarily, you said, particularly tactically astute.
Well, I feel he's a rider that has a lot of talent. He's a very strong rider, but sometimes I think his tactics maybe not the best. And we see him last year, he got into that breakaway and finished very strong. And when he gets into a position like that, he has the power. He's a stayer. He's able to stay up there in the end of a big classic. But maybe sometimes doing efforts when it's not really needed.
Sharp, Ladagnou, Turgot, Mangel, the other riders here. You saw Ladagnou looks very strong actually. Mathieu Ladagnou, very good track riders. He's opted out of doing the World Track Championships this year. There's Martin Tjallingi on the left-hand side for Rabobank. Oh, it says Sarah Montins there. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, Sarah Montins. It is Sarah Montins, former Latvian national champion. Sarah Montins had been in the breakaway already today, so obviously feeling very strong. Last 50 kilometres of this, Sean, it's going to absolutely blow to bits, I think.
Well, I think considering the racing we've had in the earlier part of the day, that is going to be really, take its toll as we go further on into this final 50 kilometres. A lot of riders will start to, to feel it, and it depends now back in the bunch here, as we can see a group of 40 riders with a lot of the big favourites, what the tactic will be there.
Hushoft's crashed. There he is. That's Thor Hushoft. The bike's got away from him. He's back on the bike, but the bike got away from him going into the roundabout there. Oh dear, Thor, former world champion, and he's really tried hard to get himself into better shape. Oh, he bunny hopped, that's what it was. He bunny hopped the traffic island, and as the bike came back down again, he had to turn left, and that's really partly his fault, I would think. Oh dear. It's one of those things you can do that 100 times or 99 times, Sean. On the 100th time, it'll happen.
Well, yes. The question is, did he just see to the last moment, and you try to bunny hop then, but your line, you haven't the line going into the roundabout, and it looked like maybe there was a little bit of oil there on the road.
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't know what's there.
And it maybe just got cut out because of that.
Bizarre, really, isn't it? Because when you thunder over all those cobblestones, that seems about the easiest thing in the world at speed, just to bunny up over a little island. But it's caught Tor Hushovd out. He's back up now. The man of granite is back on the bike. Sebastian Turgot is pushing once more at the front. He wants to have a go at this, so maybe he's trying to set something up for one of his teammates. But I think Turgot is in for his own thing. We're in the section at Orchy. He's giving it the big guns, the big push now. And trying to get away for a long one, I think, here. This is a concerted effort from Sebastian Turgot. Riding a cyclocross bike rather than a road bike. Just a little bit more relaxed angles, not necessarily hugely. The bikes tend to be very slightly smaller, the frame sizes, than road bikes. Set up, of course, with road wheels, and Turgot's taking his chance here, Sean. He knows Chavanel's not going to go and do much work. It'll be the other French teams that need to chase him down, and some of the other main favourites coming up. So he's got to go now if he wants to go. Well,
I think he's one of the riders who feel that now is the moment. He's out front. They have about a 15-second advantage over the group of big favourites, and it's an opportunity, an occasion for him to try and go in the attack and stay out in front, because if he allowed the big group of riders to come back in, well, then it's going to be very difficult to get away once again. But there were a moment there where we could see Chavanel, Char, the other riders weren't too keen on really pushing it on, and Turgot just decided this is the time to go for it and try and get away, while the other riders looked like to be just looking about and not prepared to push on at the moment.
And this time it's Mongel back onto the sections of cobbles again. This is one of the areas, I think, that was used in the Tour. You take a run off the cobbles, take a 90-degree left-hander, there's a tiny bit of tarmac, and then left-hander again back onto the cobblestones at Orchy. Sylvain Chavanel's in trouble. He's got a puncture. Sylvain Chavanel has a puncture. Now it's going, Sean. It's Bonin with Pozzato on his wheel. All of a sudden, he's lit the blue touch paper. Away he goes down the centre, down the crown of the road with 58 kilometres to go. Is he trying to kill them off? Is he just testing legs? What are we doing here? It looks as though there was a big dig there, but they're not quite committed.
I think we can see Pozzato there on the wheel of Bonin, and he's pretty much on the limit there, although he does take it up the pull on the front at the moment. Unfortunately for Chavanel, a puncture at the wrong time, just the moment that his leader Tom Bonin was going into the attack, and possibly Bonin thinks that there's a lot of riders here coming back together again. Same situation where they're just going to continue on attacking and looking at Bonin, looking for Omega Quickstep to do all the work here, and Bonin maybe making the decision, just attack here, go for it, try and get away with some of the other favourites, and he's got Pozzato in his wheel immediately. It will be interesting to see now with the two. This is
Balan here, look, chasing, I think it's Balan who's trying to get across here. Yes, the former world champion Alessandro Balan thinks this is the move to go with, because this is the two guys he ended up on the line with the Tour of Flanders with last week. Turgot is the joker amongst the pack there. They've not got much of a gap over the rest of the teams. If they push on now, the teams, they may get them back, but they have to work together. Balan makes the catch. Pozzato and Bonin start to share the work, and this is Chavanel getting a new rear wheel. That was a bit of a disastrous time to have a puncture. Popovic goes through the shot, Amador goes through the shot, and Chavanel back on. Doesn't have much luck, Chavanel, sometimes, does he? Wrong place for punctures.
Certainly the wrong place, you know.
Wrong time.
The wrong time, and at the moment when the race, you know, there was a lot happening. He's lost so much time now, and if this group succeeds in staying away, you know, then it's not so bad. But if they come back together again, and we can see that the group just behind the group of Ballan, Bonin here, they seem to be working well and possibly coming back and to catch up with our 5 leaders at the moment. And that would be a disaster for Chavanel, because if he had not had that puncture, he would certainly be in this chasing group, and it would be an opportunity for him to try and go in the attack once again.
Tom Bonin wants to keep this pace going, and what is happening to Pozzato? Is he just he's a bit isolated behind now, and nobody's going to work with him. They're going to sit on his wheel. Ballan wants to sit on his wheel. Pozzato pulls over to the side of the road thinking, well, I don't want to do all this work. This is a great move for Bonin, and they're putting distance with Nicky Terpstra. Now, if there's 2 men you didn't want up the road, it's Tom Bonin and Nicky Terpstra. Terpstra's been on absolutely magnificent form. This is a crucial moment, Sean. They've got to get across that gap.
We can see Van Summeren there trying to just get across to the 2 Omega quick-step riders. I'm not too sure if it's a real good move, because still with 55 kilometers to go, with 2 men out front, if you can pull out a nice advantage quickly, well then okay, but if you have to work for 15-20 kilometers to get any sufficient advantage, well then you could pay for that in the final. So possibly we'll see the 2 Omega quick-step riders pushing on for a while, and if they succeed at pulling out 30-40 seconds, then they will continue. But if they're just left hang out there, I could see them just cutting off their effort very quickly.
But they're trying to draw out the other teams. They're calling their bluff, aren't they? Which of the other big favourites teams are going to do the chasing? Who is going to try and shut down the gap? They'll all sit here and start to look at each other and go, okay, all right, they're going up the road, but who's going to do the work to get them? You don't want to just dive off the front, because then everybody gets an easy ride, and that's the card that the 2 Omega Pharma quick-step riders are playing. Tom Bonin, who's won this race 3 times, if he wins today, he will equal the record of Roger de Vlaming. There he is, the winner of Tour of Flanders last week. I mean, his tail feathers must be right up. Nicky Terpstra as well, former Dutch road champion, has been magnificent so far this season in the classics, Sean. In the semi-classics as well, he's just been awesome.
Yes, well, all the quick-steps have been, you know, in really good shape, and it's just going from better to better right from the start. You know, Bonin started to win races in his first races of the season, and all the teams seem to, you know, be going real well this year. And of course, you know, when your leader is going well, the domestiques in the team, the helpers in the team, seem to rise to the occasion, and that has been certainly the case right from the beginning of this year.
Well, you say not such a good move, Sean, or may not be such a good move if they can't get an early gap. Well, let's look back at who is the manager of the Omega Pharma Quick-Step team. Who's the man in charge? Patrick Lefevre. Over the last 20 years, Patrick Lefevre has had 10 victories in Paris Roubaix. He is the master of Paris Roubaix, and they'll have talked this through over and over and over. This looks like Mapai in its heyday. This looks like Ballerini and Taffy and Museo and all these guys riding away in groups. If Chavanel hadn't had a puncture, then there'd have been 3 of them.
Well, yes, we've seen that many times with the team of Patrick Lefevre, where in the Paris Roubaix in the end, there was one occasion where they had to, you know, decide who were they going to, from the team, who were they going to leave win the Paris Roubaix, because they had 3 of them out in front. A little bit of a different situation here. We're still at 53 kilometers to the finish, so you know, I'd be just a little bit concerned, but you know, with Terpstra up front, you know, he is a real strong rider, but they're going to, you know, work on it for the moment, see what happens behind, see how well they can organise, who is going to get organised behind. At the moment we can see Sky are the ones who are taking it up, and you know, they will just decide the tactic on that, but they're definitely in a real good situation, you know, with their leader out front, with their strongest domestique, with Nicky Terpstra, but getting into difficulty immediately.
Surprised.
Yeah, surprising, and you know, it's not a good situation, maybe not as good as it looked a kilometre earlier.
Yep, that's a game changer straight away. Who'd be a commentator, eh? Bonan's riding on by himself at the moment. Tom Bonan looking magnificent at the moment, but is it going to be too early? This is going to be a nail-biting finish. Now the word will go back to everybody behind that Terpstra has dropped off, and it's Bonan alone by himself with over 50 kilometres to ride. Now we've seen Fabian Cancellara do this sort of thing, but you know, he's a bit special to this sort of thing. He can do it. He's a terrific time trialist and could just go away for ages and ages and ages. There's some people I'm picking some stuff up from Twitter. One person saying Pozzato giving another win to Bonan. I just think Pozzato couldn't stay on the wheel of Bonan when he went. And then they all start looking at each other and going, well, who's going to do the chasing? Remember, Pozzato's got no other teammates in the group behind. Sky have got 2, by the way. And look, and there is Pipo coming up towards the front again. It's all about who's got riders to help out. 2 riders from BMC, Shah and Balan in there. Balan looks to be struggling a little bit. Mureyev, I think, is the rider from Astana. In the middle, there's 2 from Rabobank in this group. 1, 2, 3, 4 from Sky. Which is why they're lending a hand on the front to cut things down a little bit. Bonan is on his way by himself, and 26 seconds. It's a good gap, but it isn't enough, Sean, with 51.9 kilometres to go, I don't think. Unless he can do a Cancellara, which I doubt. This is Terpstra. Suffering. Chavanel forcing his way back up as best he can, but it's a long, long road, this. As we said just now, there would have been 3 Omega Pharma quick steps up there with him, or with at the front, should we say, including Tom Bonan and Sylvain Chavanel. He's just passed and got the wheel of Hayden Ralston there. Gregory Rust, well, he's had a difficult race as well. Rust riding 61 there. Big gear pushing on the left-hand side of the road. Gregory Rust had a puncture just coming out of the Arenberg trench. Oh, he looks powerful though, Sean. Has he got enough in the legs is the question. With over 50 kilometres to go, he's entirely committed. I mean, would you at this point knock off, I wonder, and just say, okay, right, I'm not going to make it by myself at 50 kilometres, or would you continue to go? Tom Bonan, well, now he's lost Nicky Terpstra. The funny thing about Nicky Terpstra was when we saw them, the 2 of them getting away, or trying to get away, Terpstra wasn't taking that many turns on the front. There he is. But, oh, Pipo Pozzato. Pozzato has fallen. Filippo Pozzato has gone down on the corner. Look, whoa, sliding, the back wheel sliding out on some dust, and down he goes. Pozzato on the deck. Oh. Tom Bonan still on his way, though. Just go back to that question, Sean. If you were Tom Bonan now, if you were his director sportif, would you say knock it off and wait for everybody, especially as Pozzato's gone down? Would you wait for somebody to come up to you, or are you just absolutely committed now? Because the stakes are very high.
Well, I think you have to continue. In the situation that Tom Bonan is in the moment, you continue working on it. You will see in a number of kilometres further on, if Sky, can can continue on riding. Will they continue on riding? And it's all about, you know, how much an advantage he's going to have. If it's going to hover there at 25-30 seconds, well then it is going to be real difficult for Bourne. He needs to pull out a bit more time. And that's something I think within Quick Step, the management, they'll be looking at that, and in a number of kilometres more they will make that decision.
Nicky Terpstra just about being joined by the chasing pack. There's Chavanel as he goes, just rolling along, sitting in behind the car and getting a little bit of a tow along. There's riders scattered all over the place. Difficult day then for Sylvain Chavanel. Not to be his day today. He'll just finish the race now. Tom Bowden looks mighty committed to me at 33 seconds with the Mavic neutral service car just behind him. If Tom Bowden wins this with 50, having gone at 50 kilometres, remember it was 50 kilometres or so when Fabian Cancellara went. It's about 50 kilometres to go. Fabian Cancellara went for his first, I think, win and just motored away. But this will put him on a completely different planet this year. 30 seconds now, the gap, according to Race Radio. So cutting down slightly, but it's taking 3 men from Sky to bring a charging Bowden back. But the advantage is they have 3 and 2 more men behind as well. Look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by the look of it, Sky in there. 1, 2, 3, 4. The other man behind, or maybe that's Vacol Soleil, but anyway, 4 men from Sky. Advantage to Team Sky at the moment, Sean, in terms of energy consumption anyway.
Well, it certainly is, and you know, when you look at the distance to the finish, still a long ways to go, so the numbers are very important, and Sky have, you know, the big advantage there, and again, it depends on, you know, if they're just working at it and not giving anything near 100% at the moment. Just keep the pace setting on the front there, keep going at that 30-35 seconds, and you know, see how Bourne will react out front. Leave him, you know, just walk away, leave him burn himself out, and that could be a tactic also of Sky.
Well, I understand from quite a few tweets actually that our comms are slightly ahead of your pictures, which is a bit of a shame. We are actually commentating off the live feed. We'll try and move over to commentating from our Eurosport output screen, which is about 3 seconds slower. So rather than commentating off the direct live pictures, see if we can sync them up a bit better for you. But it does make us good at predicting stuff, doesn't it? Maybe we should stick with the other one. Mons El Pavo for Tom Bowden. Stannard Heyman and Boysen Hagen all in the chasing group for Sky, according to Race Radio. Ladagnew still in there. Pozzato has got back to that group, and Shah. Turgot is there for a Europe car. And they've got some abundance of riches there. Boysen Hagen for Sky, Ian Stannard also in that group, and Matt Heyman. 3 very, very strong riders. This is a mighty effort by oh no, there's Pozzato. He's dropped back off that group again. Does he need the car? Possibly does. That's the end. Chavanel passes him. Pozzato waiting for his car here by the look of it, or waiting for the medical car. And I doubt whether Pozzato is going to get back now, Sean.
No, it doesn't look like before he was getting the assistance from the doctor there. He looked like that he was, you know, not really pushing on at all, and we just have to see now, will he get back in there. It doesn't look like to me that he's you know, able to make the effort at all.
No, it doesn't look as though he's capable or willing at the moment to make the effort. Maybe he just needs a bit of recovery here as he gets passed by a number of riders who've been dropped already. Tom Bowden, gosh, he's super, super strong. Look at this, 47 kilometres still to ride for Tom Bonen by himself as he enters another section of cobbles. What are you doing? Says the team car. Come on, what are you doing? Lots of Italian arms waving out of the side. Well, Tom Bonen looks super tough to me today. He's really got the bit between his teeth. And I was going to make the point before we went back to see those shots that Stannard and Bosenhagen and Heyman, three incredibly strong riders, Sean, and they're having trouble pegging this one back.
Well, I think there's sufficient time to peg it back. You just keep on, setting a pace on the front. You certainly not go full out and, blow your riders too quickly. They're also doing a very good job of, just leaving Tom Bonen out there, and, that will help for the rider, whoever it is going to be of the Sky team. So we still have 46 kilometres to go. There's a long ways, and the gap is 29 seconds at the moment. So for Bonen, I think he would rather be pulling out a bit more of an advantage at this point, but it's at the moment it's not happening.
Fletcher. Equally, people tweeting in saying, no, it's the other way around now. The picture's ahead of your commentary now. You get what you get. All right, sorry about that. Big move to try and get across here. Sean trying to get away from the bunch and over towards Tom Bonen and his Juan Antonio Fletcher. Now, he's ridden these cobbles many times. Been up there in the final selection many times, and luck has deserted him for most of the time. Just off the road. Running, I think that was Luca Paolini, but I'm not sure. Juan Antonio Fletcher trying to break the elastic, trying to get away, Sean, and mix it up here. He's been in the final many times, but luck's always deserted him, really. Well,
again, I think Fletcher, he's a great rider. Paris Roubaix, he's done some great performances. Sometimes I question his tactics. And again, here, his team was doing a very good job. And then he goes in the attack, still with 45 kilometres out. Allow your team, sacrifice two of your men, allow them to keep on riding, keep on and hanging there at that 25-30 seconds. Perfect scenario. No need to panic, because the finish is a long ways away here, and now he takes it up and tries to go across on his own. As we can see, Balan is just going to close them down here, but the problem is, when you attack like that, you're going to eliminate one or two of your riders who have been riding for a number of kilometres, because if you up that pace by 2-3 kilometres per hour. So I think the tactic there, not the best one at the moment. I think he could have just held off for a number of kilometres more and see what his team is capable of doing. They were holding Bonen, if not closing him down, so that for me is a good enough situation at this point in the race.
Yes, indeed. Fletcher, Balan, all moving up onto the rear wheel of Tom Bonen. Now it's Sky who've done most of that work trying to shut the gap. Maybe Sky have sacrificed Juan Antonio Fletcher in the move to try and shut things down for another of their riders, possibly Edvald Bosenhagen, as it means that because Fletcher is such a major competitor in these races, everybody then has to try and work. The Sky boy's not going to do anything. Everybody else has to work. Balan, you've already seen, shutting that gap. Tom Bonen, 31 seconds of an advantage. This is mighty strong by him at the moment, but for how long? That's rain. Is that not rain? I can see on the lens the very first spots of rain. Well, there's none here at the Velodrome at Roubaix at the moment. Bosenhagen and Heyman in this group here, with another of my outside bets, Lars Bohm, Mathieu Ladagnou in the white of Française de Jeu. And there's Fletcher. Three men from Sky in this little group that are chasing Tom Bonen at 33 seconds. It's a great move for Sky. They've got three massively powerful men in here. There's Balan. the former world champion, riding for BMC. Ladagnou for Francis Dejeux, Big Matt, and the man who we talked about a couple of years ago being a potential winner of this race in the future, Lars Bohm, the former world cyclocross champion. Very, very powerful indeed. And when we were talking about outsiders, Telenghi and Bohm were both outsiders for me. Then there's a gap back of what, 10 seconds or so to a group of chasing riders there. This is the Chavanel group. They are exiting the section of cobblestones now. Hushoft in this group as well on the wheel of Chavanel. And George Hinkepi, I think, is the other rider from BMC in here. Hasn't been a great day for him. This is a magnificent performance so far by Bonin. Has he overestimated his ability to time trial to the finish, though, Sean? This is the big question.
Well, that is the question for the moment. You know, it's working out quite well. Still that 34 seconds advantage, and we have a group of, you know, some very strong riders here, and of course from Sky they have the numbers here at the moment. Lars Bohm is, you know, he's there. He hasn't done anything. The question is, how is he feeling? Is he still in good shape, or is he starting to suffer? And that is the question you have to ask about everybody in this chasing group. Of course, Fletcher, he's coming back from injury. The final of this race could be really difficult for him. So it's a difficult one for Bonin, but at 42 kilometers, 34 seconds, you know, it's certainly not over, but he's in a real good position, and so it all depends how good Bonin is. If he is really, really strong and he can, you know, continue on at this pace, well then that 34-second advantage, it's a nice situation to be in.
On goes Tom Bonin. He's still powering away, looking fantastically powerful at the moment. Into sector 9 at Maringet and Evla. But for me, the danger man behind is Lars Bohm, because Sky have got 3 men. They can continue working. Bohm's just going to sit in there. He's a very good time trialist. He's got enough ability to power on and he's got now the maturity to get into this race a little bit further. He's a great bike handler. He's a former world cyclocross champion, a former under-23 world time trial champion. For me, I don't know about you, Sean, but for me, he's the danger man in this group.
Yes, he is the one who is tactically he is very clever, and I think he's doing a good job here today. Bosenhagen for me should be you know, capable of doing something here. He has got teammates around him, and when you get into the final 50 kilometers of a Roubaix and you see a number of, you know, team jerseys around you there, that gives you a huge boost of confidence. And, you know, for Bosenhagen, he's a real powerful, a real strong man. So I would say Bosenhagen for me is in a real good position. Balan, I don't think we've seen the end of him in this race today.
We shall see. This is looking very much like a Cancellara a few years ago, or Museo in fact, when he won with about 50 kilometers of riding by himself. That was orchestrated by team manager of Omega Pharma Quickstep. At the moment, Patrick Lefebvre, he's had 10 wins in the last 20 years for his boys on the bike. As Lars Bohm moves to the front, looking very cool and collected. Alessandro Balan's just taken a turn. Then there's Fletcher, Bosenhagen and Heyman, riding on the crown of the cobbles there, right in the middle of the road, staying out of the messy stuff at the side, staying out of the way of over-enthusiastic spectators. Broken cobbles as they get pushed down on either side, and back onto the tarmac again. 40 seconds, the gap is going up. Surely they have got to do it a little bit more now to drag him back. Tozzato leads this group with Van Sommeren in it, and another man from Sky. I'm not coming through, he says. Stannard, I think it is. He's got 3 men up the road, so why should he? Oh, now he's going to go across, see if he can get across the gap to them. Sylvain Chavanel, Omega Pharma Quickstep's other great card to play, had a puncture just over 50 kilometers to go. Looks like Holzmann's just behind him from the Farnese Vini squad. There's Telenghi of Rabobank. But this is the man who's going to try and make history today by riding a 50-kilometer time trial towards the end to take a 4th Paris Roubaix victory. The only man who's won 4 editions of this race is the great Flemish rider Roger de Vlaming. He was around about the same time. He was around at the same time as the other great Flandrian crop of all that period. People like Eddy Merckx, who was, although he lived on the outskirts of Brussels, he's a Flandrian by birth. Walter Godefroot, again, all at the same time. Freddie Martens. De Vlaming was, or Van Springel, all these riders. But Roger de Vlaming was known as Mr. Paris-Roubaix, still is known as Mr. Paris-Roubaix. 4 additions to his name. 1974, 75, 77 and 72 was his first victory. And Bonen just has to keep himself together here. He's got a 42-second advantage from a very hard riding group of about 15 men now, with Ian Stannard now on the front. Now Stannard has come across a group here. His 3 teammates, Heyman, Fletcher and Bosenhagen, were in a group just ahead of him, and Stannard has ridden particularly hard to get across and is now driving the peloton along. He knows how to suffer, that man, Ian Stannard, Sean.
He certainly do, and he's doing a real good job at the moment. He came across with a small group there and immediately comes to the front and starts setting the pace. And Tom Bonen equally doing a great job. The time we're getting there, 44 seconds with 37.6 kilometers to the finish. It's going to be a battle now for Bonen out front to see can he keep it going. He's really riding at a very, very powerful and a very strong rate, but to keep that going, he's been out there for quite a long time. But everybody is going to get tired in this bunch, although with Sky you can see on the front with 5 riders up there. Numbers, can count a lot in the end, but it's all depending on how strong Bourne is today. He's looking very impressive for the moment, but my concern is 37 kilometres still to go after having such a very difficult race. Earlier on today, they were riding at such a fast pace. I think we will see some riders paying for this in the final 20-25 kilometres.
The first 2 hours were ridden at 47 kilometres an hour. Bonen is out by himself. He's got 45 seconds of a gap. I can't believe this man is riding away from them. There's 14 riders behind, 5 of which are doing the riding. The rest are getting the tow at the moment. But Sky have 5 riders, extraordinarily talented riders. Juan Antonio Fletcher, Edvald Bosenhagen, Matt Heyman, Ian Stannard, all pushing along. Nicky Terpstra in the middle of them. Lars Bohm is in this group as well. So there's 4 riders, isn't it, for Sky? 1, 2, 3, 4. There we are. And Stannard absolutely burying himself with riding for Bosenhagen by the look of it, who's the last in line for the Sky riders. Another second in favour of Tom Bonen. 2 minutes and 25 seconds back to the group containing Sylvain Chavanel. Hushoft, we understand, has had another puncture, which is not good, or had a puncture. Oh, this is an extraordinary effort. And Wilfred Peters leaning out of the car, just giving some advice. Peters is a man who knows about these races as well, Sean, doesn't he? He's finished up on the podium at least twice, and in some dreadful circumstances, dreadful weather circumstances as well. A proper tough rider.
Yes, well, Peters himself was a specialist classic and a specialist in the Paris Roubaix. He was up there on many occasions in the final and on the podium, and he has no lack of experience, and we could see him there. He was just spelling it out to Bonen, and when you're on the bike there and you're giving it close to 100%, you need that from your director sportif. Give him a clear picture of what's happening behind, and that's what Wilfred Peters was going about doing there.
46 seconds the gap is at the moment. I tell you what, I'm not quite sure how long Stannard will be able to do this for. He is super tough. And Nicky Terpstra back in this group again. He did ride away. He was instrumental in helping very slightly Boland to get away in the first place. The two of them went away, and then Terpstra dropped off, unable to hold the pace of his team captain, this man here, Tom Bonan. This is a magnificent ride. Other men that we've seen win from lone breaks, not as long as this one. André Schmil won by himself in 1994. The race are longer than it is today, 257.5 today. One of the longer races in modern years. That one 270 kilometers. Henny Kuiper won the longest in the, I suppose, the post-1980 period. 274k back in 1983. Triple wins for Francesco. Not many riders have won 3 in a row, interestingly. Francesco Moser did it. I think Moser was the last man to do it. 3 rides in a row. A number of them have done it, but Octave Lepise did it early on in the history of this race, just before the First World War. But I think Moser was the last man to ride 3 back-to-back. And of course, Bonan won't be doing that either if he makes it to the end. 48 seconds. Oh, my word. This is getting out of control. Stannard has done his bit. It's everything he can do. He's given everything now, and he'll try and stay there. That's it. Stannard is gone now, and it's back down to Matt Hayman, who did a tremendous amount of work for Mark Cavendish in Milan San Remo. He knows again about pulling along, but if Ian Stannard, who's in good shape and very, very hard indeed, if he cannot stick the pace of Tom Bonan, it shows how hard Bonan is going.
It certainly does, and you know, Bonan has been out there for a long time before Stannard took up the pace, and you know, Stannard came up from behind, and I reckon that he, was tied up in a group. He certainly wasn't going to ride to catch that group out front, because he already had Fletcher and Bosen hanging up there in that group ahead of him. Yeah. And you know, we've seen he's put in a good effort, rode a number of kilometres on the front, but still just after blowing there. The surprising thing is with Sky, normally when you ride with a team and you have a number of riders, that Stannard and the other rider from Sky who is there,
Bosenhagen and Fletcher,
Heyman, who is riding at the moment. Surprising that Heyman and Stannard did not ride together, because when you ride a bit, you ride a couple of 100 metres in the front, then you change over and you get that race speed, and you can continue on for much longer than that. I'm surprised they did not use that tactic and use the 2 men together and try and close down the advantage on Bonan.
This is La Moulin de Vartin, the section that they're entering now. 51 seconds the gap is going up. I suppose the only answer to that, Sean, would be perhaps that Tom Bonan is riding so well that Heyman, Fletcher and Bosenhagen, let's assume they're rising for Bosenhagen for a minute. Heyman and Fletcher thought there's no way we can ride together bit and bit. The best thing is if Ian can sacrifice himself for another 5-6 kilometres, we've got 5 or 6 more kilometres to work together. That's the only explanation I can think of. God, this is a rough section of stuff. But Heyman seems to be riding by himself, and no other teams are going to give him any help at all at the moment. But it's getting a little bit dangerous. Nearly a minute's gap as they too go on to the Moulin de Vartin section. Very rough, horrible section of cobblestones, 500 meters or so. And it's come after 224 kilometers of riding. 14 riders in the mix, and only 1 or 2 riding to try and cut down Tom Bonan. He's just powering across these cobblestones. Look at the big gear. Shows how rough this section is. This is horrible.
Yes, it is a very bad section, and we can see Bonan is getting over it very well. the advantage still growing out there. 56 seconds, 57 seconds at the moment. We're coming to the point now where the other riders who are in this group, if they're going to have any chance of winning this Paris Roubaix, they're going to have to try and do something to rectify the situation, because it looks like Sky, they're doing a magnificent job, but they're still not eating into the time advantage of Bourne. They're just losing time at the moment. So I'd not be surprised if we see somebody going in the attack out of this group, which the Sky team are pulling along at the moment.
Well, the Belgian press has been absolutely on fire over the last week with stories and features and articles on this man. Tom Boonen is having the best season he's had for I reckon 3-4 years, Sean. He's been able to do something each year, but never quite lived up to the incredible early career that he'd had. But this year, this is something else. I've got to say, I'm not a huge fan of a black S Works, but I do like that one. That's lovely. I don't think it made me go as fast as Tom Boonen. 56 seconds now. This is a section here, Sean, where before we get up to we're getting closer and closer to Carrefour de l'Arbre, and they will have to start working together as a group at this point while they've got some tarmac amongst them.
Well, I think to work together, it's difficult to see that happening. I think we will see attack coming on the cobble sections. That's where you can really, blow this group of about 15 chasers. I think we have got in that Fletcher group, it's all down to how they're feeling this group. If there's some of the guys like Boom, Balan. If they are capable of putting in a big attack here and breaking up this group and maybe getting away with just a small 2 or 3 guys who can work well together. 30 kilometres to go, 56 seconds. It's looking just better and better for Tom Boonen at this moment. And if you wait until the section of Carrefour d'Arbre, I think with the advantage Boonen have at the moment, it's not possible for anybody to close it down at that point unless we see Boonen really tiring in the end. It's too much of an advantage going on for a minute at the moment.
Heyman still doing a huge job here at the front. The two riders from Rabobank just saying, well, what are we going to do now? As Tom Boonen rides off into the distance, somebody somewhere has got to get out from behind the Sky Riders. It's clear they're not cutting down the advantage, so they're going to have to start working together. And those discussions have to be had soon, and somebody has to take a decision, because if they don't, this man, the Flandrian rider Tom Boonen, is going to win Paris Roubaix with a magnificent solo effort of 50 kilometres. And it is a huge effort that he put into start, and he's now just time trialing his way off into the distance, and he's got some very strong riders behind him. Other ultra favourites and good outsiders are just sitting there. Nicky Terpstra, well, he's playing a blinder. I mean, he could be just sitting there and waiting until they all get towed in for second place, and let's do a Lefebvre special and then sprint out in the last kilometre and get second. Almost a minute, and under 30 kilometres to go for Tom Boonen. And there's almost little to say about what are the guys waiting for? Tazato's in this group here for Saxo Bank, looking down at these chain set, wondering if there's anything wrong. Ladagnou, who was very active earlier on for Francis de Jour, Big Matt, is also there. This is Sky trying to get back on. Juan Antonio Fletcher went back to the car, needed to get a bottle, I think, or was talking to somebody. Sebastian Turgot is riding in this group. He's been very active, moves to the front. Fletcher, Paolini from Katusha in the red and the white. Ahead him Tazzato in the royal blue of Saxo Bank now. Surely somebody's going to take a flyer from here, Sean. If they're not going to work together, somebody's going to have to do something. Will they do it individually? Will a group do it? Will 2 or 3 guys do it? Will a team do it? We've got more than one rider in here, and that's only really Rabobank.
Yes, I don't think we will see a team doing it, and Rabobank has the only one, apart from Sky, who've got a number of riders in here. I think it's going to be an attack on the couple of sections that are coming through. Anybody is capable of, putting in a big attack and breaking up this group and try to get away with 2-3 riders, and that is the only way that they're going to work together. If they can do that, well, then you could see those riders working together and trying to walk into the advantage of Bonin.
Well, Sky, 3 men riding on the front. Once again, Fletcher taking up the station at the back here. Terpstra shadowing them. Jan van Summeren moves up towards the front. He's been sitting down the back of this group. He's made it in there. Defending champion from last year. There is Edvald Bosenhagen. Matt Heyman still rides at 57 seconds is the gap. Well, it's being pegged at the moment, and other riders still not prepared to make the effort. Maybe they feel they've got something left in the legs, that Tom Bonin is going to burn himself out. It's a magnificent effort so far. Well, I tell you what, if he doesn't win, Sean, he's going to go down to blaze of glory. What about is the possibility that perhaps Sky have been riding way too much, and that the director sportif should maybe say, hey, sit up, boys, let somebody else do the work?
Well, the situation is with Bohm, he has a teammate there. I think he should be contributing something, and I'm surprised that they're not trying to get the other teams to give a dig out here and ride with them on the front. Sky are the ones who have been riding for kilometre after kilometre now, and the other riders are just getting a handy carry along, and they're still, glory out of this race. If Tom Bonin stays out in front, they're still, second and third place, which is very important in the Paris Roubaix. It's a big achievement to get onto the podium in this one, and there's no guarantee that Sky are going to do that with the way they're riding at the moment. They're carrying along a lot of dangerous riders, and surprising that they're not, playing bluff a little bit, and just trying to get some of the other teams to contribute something. I
still think we'll get to Carrefour de l'Arbre, and I think it'll be. What am I hoping? What am I dreaming of? I think it'll be Lars Bohm and Alessandro Ballan will give it a big kick, and Van Summeren will go with them. Those are the 3 I think might try and make something out of it. Tozzato too, although he's looking a bit ragged. Tozzato, he's looking a bit on the edge, but he's very, very strong, and he's good for these sort of races. Let's see, shall we? Out of those riders, Sean, if anybody was to go and make an attack, I've just put my neck on the block and said of those 3 riders, who do you think is in? It looks to you when you see those the body language, who would go?
Well, I think it's the ones who are getting carried along. They're going to try and do something, and Van Summeren, for example, he's going to try and go in the attack. Ballan will go in the attack because he knows when he gets to the finish with a number of other riders, he has no chance in the sprint. So anybody who feels that if it comes to a sprint, they're not going to get onto the podium, but it looks very like now that with a minute coming to the 25 kilometres to go, if they wait to the Carrefour d'Arbre, well, then you're only riding for second and third place on the podium. But there's so much, to calculate in there. Are they capable of attacking at this distance?
That's the other question, yeah.
That is, the big question, because Sky are doing a tremendous ride here. They're keeping this pace really high, and the other riders are just maybe comfortable enough to just stay in the slipstream and just get carried along and not able to attack.
Well, they may be doing a terrific ride, Sean, but they aren't doing as terrific a ride as Tom Bonin, who's out ahead by himself. This is a 50-kilometre ride. He's done 25 of it by himself already, and it looks like Nicky Terpstra's gritting his teeth now with 25 kilometres to go. And for me, I'm still saying it, Ballan and Bonin, Ballan and Boom and Van Summeren look the threatening ones for me. They're just going to go. I've got that feeling about it. I may be completely wrong, and I most often am, but it just looks as though they are waiting for Sky to bury themselves, and there will be nothing left. 1 minute and 2 seconds.
Well, Bosenhagen cannot allow that to happen, because his teammates have done such a great job, and I think he's the one who the responsibility is on his shoulders. Fletcher, you know, we have to remember that he's only coming back from an injury. He hasn't raced a lot at all, so you know it's going to be difficult for him in the final. So for me, Bosenhagen is the one from Sky who has to definitely get on the podium today when you consider the job they have done in this final 60 kilometres.
There's a break here. Here's the break going. There you go. Juan Antonio Fletcher, Jan van Summeren, Lars Boom and Alessandro Ballan have made the break. Boom, to me, looks the strongest here. Now the question is, who is really going to ride out of that four? Ladagnou looks like he wants to come across. They're all scattering around here, but 103, are they going to leave it too late? With Tom Bonen still powering on. Adrian Mulholland gets the prize for quickest joke for Paris Roubaix. Spaniard, Australian, Norwegian walk into a bar. Tom Bonen says, "What took you so long?" There you go. Sector 6. Borgela Wanan. Just 1100 metres of cobbles. It's not as rough as some of the earlier sections, but we're rapidly running out of time if anybody wants to stop this man from taking a 4th Paris-Roubaix title and equaling the great gypsy himself, Roger de Vlamingh. De Vlamingh will be looking at this with a wry smile on his face, Sean, wouldn't he? He was a fierce competitor then. He's still a fierce rider now.
Yes, and I'm not sure he'll be looking at with a smile on his face, because reading the Belgian press, he spoke up and said that yes, he would like to see Bonen equal him with his 4 victories in the Paris-Roubaix, but it's looking very much is going to be the case now with Tom Bonen. If we do not see some major action in the next 5 kilometres with 23.5 kilometres to go, over a minute advantage for Bonen, then it's going to be, you know, pretty much the race that Bourne has just dominated today.
Absolutely, completely dominated. 103. We have to see some major action. Can they do anything about it? That's the big question. 104. Let's have a look at the facial expression of Tom Bonen, beginning to feel it, but still regular hard rhythm as the group comes back together again, with Bohm taking the high ground here. Lars Bohm in the middle and moving smartly up onto the wheel of Sky's Fletcher. Jan van Summeren gets in his wheel. Ballan is still in there. Does that Sebastian Turgot is trying to move up the outside to get in the wheel? Nicky Terpstra seems to have come back a little bit. Here we are having trouble. Is Edvald Bosenhagen. That's the end of his day, I'm afraid, I think. Well, certainly he's having trouble staying with the group completely.
Yes, and never seen the answer why he wasn't, making some move. Because
and that's Heyman.
Heyman is it's normal that Heyman is going out the rear door, because he has done a huge amount of work. For Bosenhagen, he's the one who has been being carried along there, but just haven't got it, and it's game over for him. He's not going to recover from this, and he's not going to do anything in the line of attack, because when you see him going out the rear door, it's the end of his energies.
Terpstra trying to shut down the move. They'll try to get across to the move from Ballan and Lars Bohm. 101. The gap is for the first time. The gap just came down for a couple of seconds. That's all. But that's the first time we've seen it for a long, long time. 22 kilometres to go. Bonen looking a little bit more tired now, Sean.
Yes, I'm not surprised, but everybody in that group of chasers are also, starting to tire big time. And the question is there somebody in there who has been keeping it very cool, bluffed it well, and just play the waiting game? But they will have to, Bonen will have to tire a lot in this final for them to close down this minute, and we will also have to see a very strong attack out of the group of chasers. So, you know, the situation Bowen is at the moment, if he can keep it going, anything like he's been doing the last number of kilometres, I don't see him being pulled back in this final.
No, if he can keep it going, that's the thing. As far as bluffers go in the chasing group, for me, as I said, it's Lars Bohm. He's the bluffing one there for me. But we'll see, because it doesn't make any difference how much you bluff if you can't close the gap. 1 minute and 4 seconds. Visibly huge. And it's a magnificent ride by Tom Bonen. It's a very brave thing as well to think, well, you know what, I'm going to go and win this. I feel good. I've got some of my major rivals aren't here, so I've got a little bit more to play with. I am really going to go now. I'm going to go and I'm going to try and make this my own. Make this race, stamp my authority on it, and become a 4-time winner, equaling the record. Yep, I'm convinced that it's Lars Bohm who is teeing himself up if he possibly can. But they've now put teammate Wijnands on the front to try and shut the gap down, but that's not doing any good at the moment. Sean, 1:08, the gap's gone out again.
Yes, it's certainly, you know, hanging in there around the minute 5, minute 8 at the moment. You know, when you look at Bowen there just a moment ago, it looked like he was suffering a lot, but sometimes, you know, it's just a slight little bit uphill. You turn direction, maybe it's a bit of a headwind, and it looks, you know, that the rider is suffering majorly. So it's hard to compare, because when we go back to our chasing group, we see the Rabobanks with Martin Wijnands taking it up. He looked like he was going that little bit faster, but you know, it's really difficult to compare, because there are different points on the route.
Well, you have to question the tactics of some of the others. Lars Bohm puncture. He's got to get back in as quickly as he possibly can. He can try and get back on the back of one of the cars. Sky aren't going to hang around for him. There ain't no chance of that. Fresh bike for Lars Bohm. That's a disastrous time to have that. We're inside the last 20 kilometres, and that's probably put pay to his efforts, if any. 1 minute and 17 seconds. I do not think it's going to happen for anybody in the chasing group now, because there seems to be no slowing down the relentless pressure of a magnificent Tom Bonen today. 5 sectors of Pavé to go, and Bonen is just cruising away from the rest of the 1 minute and 20 seconds. This is a magnificent ride, and everybody who's ever been here on their bikes for a sporty or for fun, or anybody who's ever ridden the race at junior espoir level, anybody who's won this race, and there are plenty of them around watching, Museo and the Vlaming and former winners like Sean next to me. There's a lot of raised eyebrows here going, he's a strong boy today.
He certainly is, and you know, when he went in the attack, my concern was, you know, was he taking it up too early? Was he, you know, a bit too anxious to get into the action a bit too early in the race? I don't think so. It's looking like that he's just going to, you know, pull out an advantage here. 1:21 at the moment as we go to that 18 kilometres to go, and getting through this section from here on, you know, it's not majorly difficult. It doesn't look like Bowen is going to, you know, slow down much in this final.
Yeah, it doesn't. Not at all. Bosenhagen sitting now behind Luca Paolini, who's having a purple patch in his career here. He's always been a good rider, but having a very good 2012. 18 kilometres to go, 1:24 is the gap. They're all riding for the second spot now, Sean, by the look at it.
Yes, I think that's all they can do now. You know, still going 1:24 at the moment. It's not possible to see Bonen being closed down the final, and I think everybody in that chasing group, there was a lot of riders, you know, Balan, We could see that Tosato, as you said, was sitting there. Bohm, he had that flat, but he got back in pretty quickly. Nobody really able to put in a big attack and break up this group, and that tells that everybody is just on the rivet. And at this time, I think they're just starting to think now about the second place on the podium.
Yeah, problems for Heyman. There's definitely some water on that lens there, Sean. Just a couple of spots of rain. It's going to stay a dry race in general, though. Here goes Lars Bohm. He's changed his bike. Whether it's a deliberate bike change or not, who knows? Tom, go for it. Absolutely. But he's ridden up back through that chasing group and has now struck out. Whether he'll get a significant gap or not is another thing. Alessandro Ballan and Juan Antonio Fletcher behind him. 1:21 now is the gap. Here comes Lars Bohm. This is a massive effort now. Finally, somebody's shown their cards about attacking, and it's the former world cyclocross champion Lars Bohm. He's got to remember he's an under-23 world time trial champion in the past as well. And that's the first individual attack we've seen out of the bunch, Sean.
Well, yes, it's the first one we have seen since Bourne and Terpstra, made the attack, and he's waited a long time. Maybe Lars Bohm was going to attack a little bit earlier. His mechanical problem maybe just upset that for a moment.
Stay on the bike, Tom. Stay on the bike.
He's doing a good job, and Bourne still, he's charging into these corners, really pushing it on. Now we will see, how much Bohm, how strong he is, how much he's got left in the tank. But Tom Bowen is still just powering along here. Maybe Lars Bohm thinks that his cyclocross skills might give him a little advantage into some of these nastier corners where Bonen has had to sort of charge in and just take his foot off the gas a little bit. Who knows? 1:11, the gap is coming down with 16.5 kilometers to go. Perfectly possible to take those smoother sections on the right or left hand side if you possibly can. Why not? After all, the only place that they don't do it anymore is they bury it off the Arenberg, where it was just getting out of hand. People going up behind spectators, trying to get on some smooth forest grass rather than the Arenberg trench. 1:11 the gap now with the Lars Bohm, the solo man chasing. Gets into Carrefour de l'Arbre. 1:10. He's not taking much out of him with 16 kilometers to go. Be interesting to see what the gap is when they get to the end of this Carrefour section, which is a long one, Sean, isn't it? At 2.1 kilometers. And the gap is pretty big now with Bolan, Ladagnew and Fletcher chasing. Dodgy corner, this one. This is the one where Hushoff fell off, I think. Very tight and lots of dust on that. He gets through okay. Normally the spectators here are tanked up from about 9 o'clock in the morning. The lone chaser, Lars Bohm, has made a big effort to get away. How much has he got in the tank to try and shut down Bonen at the moment? He's going well, but we don't see any change in the timings whatsoever, Sean. No, it did when Bohm went in the attack immediately. It maybe came down 2-3 seconds, but now I think it's stabled out again. 1:09 at the moment. He's not eating into it as fast as you would expect because he's the fresh man. He's been in this group for a long time. He's been carried along by the Sky Riders, who are setting the pace for a lot of kilometres, where Tom Bowen has been out there in front, and it's not coming down as quickly as I would have expected, and possibly we can see Balan here. It looks like they're coming back to closing down on Bowen.
Well, he had a quick look over his shoulder. Yes, they are closing down on him. Lars Bohm has cut the gap by about 15 seconds to Tom Bonen, but that's not going to be enough with 15 to go as they go towards the end of Carrefour de l'Arbre. There are 3 more sections to go, only 2 of which are significant. The one at Gruson which is 1,100 metres, and the one at Willems and into Hem, which is 1,400 metres. And then after that, it's just 300 metres up the road in towards the Velodrome at Roubaix. This is the only thing you can laughingly call a slope here in Paris Roubaix. This is a dangerous time for Bonin to keep away from all those spectators, and he does so. 109 the gap. It's not coming down. And Bohm's put the effort in, but it looks, as you say, as though Balan is getting across to him. Riding on the big ring, but right up the block here. 112. Oh, amazingly, he's not made any impression at all against going back out again, Sean.
Yes, it did, as I say, came down, you know, a number of seconds, but again, it's just starting to go out again, and I think, you know, Bonin, he has just put in such a performance today, and he's holding on so strong. That was my concern when he did go out, that he would pay dearly in the final 20-25 kilometres if there was a lot of action behind, but he hasn't, you know, slowed down really at all. He's just kept working at it, and it's just a super performance by Tom Bonin.
Magnificent, absolutely magnificent. Is it even possible, Sean, that Lars Bohm has seen that other riders are coming across? He's seen a select group coming across, and he still feels as though if those four can work together, they can do something.
No, I don't think, you know, when they will be made aware that the advantage is still that 110, 112 at 14 kilometres to go. You know, they know now that they can feel it, and the riders, you know, they're the ones who can make the calculation depending on how you are feeling, and that's what I said, 25 kilometres to go. It would be interesting to, you know how well they are feeling in that group, and I think everybody was a little bit under pressure. That's why we didn't see anybody attacking from much further out. They would have to attack 20-25 kilometres from the finish to have any chance to close down on Bonin when he had that you know, 1 minute plus advantage, but they did not do it. They were all playing the waiting game, and I think the answer we can see now is everybody is pretty much on the limit, on the rivet, as they say in cycling.
1 minute and 14 seconds. A group of magnificent riders behind Jan van Sommeren, Juan Antonio Fletcher, Lars Bohm, Martin Weinens, Alessandro Balan. They've had absolutely no effect. Edvald Boasson Hagen, Heyman, no effect on bringing Tom Bonin back. Now, I don't think anybody would have put it past Tom Bonin for being the hot favourite for today's race, but I don't think anybody expected him to ride away with 50 kilometres to go and to just basically blow everybody out of the weeds. And as you suspected, Sean, we haven't seen the last of Alessandro Balan yet. He wants to salvage something from this. 1 minute and 12 seconds. They're just going to fight for second place. There's nothing left to fight for.
Yes, it's now a battle for second place.
Ladagnu, puncture. That is, oh no. Oh, that's awful for Mathieu Ladagnu.
And you can see the reason why when you ride off the cobble sections, you can see all this loose grit, all these stones. Well, you know, it's such a risk to ride there, but when you're on the limit and the other riders are doing that, you know, it's such an invitation to do that, but you're always, you know, open to getting a flat, as we see here.
He's got to Luca Paolini, who's just gone past him. Maybe he can use that. Still riding on the gravel at the side of the road, runs the risk of doing exactly the same. He's got to get back on the... he's not going to get it back on. Just waiting for those guys to get out the way. Ladagnu trying to make as much ground up as possible. Race Radio gives us 1 minute 25 seconds for Tom Bonin. This is possibly, Sean, the best Spring Classics campaign I've seen from a rider for years and years and years. This man, Tom Bonin, has won a whole fistful of rides already in the Classics and Semi-Classics. Gent-Wevelgem, Harelbeke, Tour of Flanders, and he's looking like he's going to win this one as well. I'm trying to think back on a rider recently who's had such a consistent Spring Classics campaign in the Cobble Classics. Even Cancellara has not had a season as good as this yet.
No, I don't think there's anybody has had such a consistent season as Tom Bonan has had this year. Maybe a number of years ago when Bonan was winning Tour of Flanders on Paris Roubaix himself, he was close to it. But the style he was winning in, I think he was calculating more on his sprint. Where here today, he certainly did not make the calculation, stay with a number of riders and try and take this on the sprint. He took it so far out, and when he did go with Terpstra there, it looked like that it was a danger thing to do. I certainly, if I was the director sportif, I would have been majorly concerned to do at that point.
Yeah.
But again, the riders, they know how he's feeling. The director sportif, they know each other so well. They went and took that risk, and it just worked out so well. And I think 122 at the moment. I think it's a bit more than that, because Race Radio seems to be saying it's a bit.
They're nearly 130 now.
A bit more, close to 1.5 minutes. And what a ride Bonan has done today. And I think it's going to be the best classic campaign of his career.
Yep. That's for sure. That's absolutely for sure. 122 the graphic gives us here. Race Radio gives us a little bit more. Balan third in last week's Tour of Flanders. Fletcher again playing the bridesmaid here in Paris Roubaix. Lars Bohm, who was the man who drove off the front to fracture the chasing group. Bonan, though, is going to be uncatchable. This is a magnificent ride. The finish is within sniffing distance for the Flandrian. He's going to move back to Belgium from Monaco after Paris-Roubaix. He'll have trouble staying out of the press and the limelight after this ride. Magnificent. The biggest ever gap, by the way. And the finish of a Paris-Roubaix was when Eddy Merckx beat Roger de Vlamingh in 1970. The gap then was 5 minutes and 21 seconds, the smallest ever gap, you'll remember this, between Plankett and Bauer back in 1990. Eddy being beaten by 1 centimetre on the line by the great Canadian rider, hard man, Steve Bauer. And the final words from Wilfried Peters about you've got under 10 kilometres to go. Keep it rolling along. They're over a minute and a half behind. You can see the fire's gone out of the chase here. Should I say, almost got it Brian then. I'm used to seeing Brian. Sean, the fire's going out of the chase here. The three of them are just riding around turn on turn, and they know they're just riding for second. They just have to be careful about who's behind now. Well,
I think they're making the calculation now. Spare as much as you can and try and get the best place that's left in this race, which is second and third place on the podium. They're definitely in that calculation zone at the moment, and I think they've been in for quite a while. But when you're in the final there with 3 riders as we have in the chase, it also depends on how you're feeling. If you're starting really to feel tired, feeling the effects, well then you have to conserve as much as possible. Every turn of the unnecessary turn of the pedal you can pay from the end. And of course they're all thinking about getting the best place left on the podium, which is second, and then the third place. And unfortunately for the 3 chasers, there's going to be one who is not going to get
unfortunate,
on this great podium here in the Velodrome in Roubaix.
Yes, when they come around into the Velodrome in Roubaix, they have to do 1.5 laps to finish. The winner of this race gets a massive, great brick of granite.
And 30,000 euros.
And yes, the euros are always handy. Oh, the vital moment, the picture's gone. It's come back. Oh, thank goodness for that. 132, the lead for Tom Bonan at this moment, and 3 men behind him. Alessandro Balan of BMC, the former world champion, a former winner of the Tour of Flanders, and always a presence in the last few years here in Paris-Roubaix. Juan Antonio Fletcher riding for Sky this time. We've seen him in at least 2 other colours of teams, and he's still playing, as I said, the bridesmaid, and hasn't won this yet. And the final man in there, the former World Under-23 time trial champion, a former World Cyclocross champion, Lars Bohm of Rabobank. But just look at the power. Seamless. fabulous ride by Tom Bonen. This is proper Merckx. This is proper De Vlaming. This is real stuff. And David Duffield, back in the UK, who just loves this race, called me last night on the way out and said to say hello to everybody, because this was what he lived for, this race, and he'll be watching this at home thinking this is magnificent. 1:34. Breed them hard in Flanders, don't they?
Certainly do. And Bonen, what a way to win a Roubaix. It's always, a dream for a rider to win Roubaix, and Bonen has won all the big classics already, but when you come into the final and you're with 3 or 4 riders, it's always nervous times, because when you get to a sprint, although a rider like Bonen, if he arrive in a sprint with 3 or 4 other riders, he's the better sprinter of the ones we have here, who will be on the podium today. But you're always concerned about crashes, where here he's over a minute and a half ahead. Even if he has a flat tyre here, he can make a change and he's still not in any major danger. And that is, it must be a great feeling. I never had that opportunity. I was never in that situation. I always came in and had to calculate and try and win in a sprint. But when you can come on to the velodrome in Roubaix with a big advantage, which Bonen has got, you can soak up the atmosphere. It must be a great feeling.
I never really thought about it like that, Sean. You didn't have time to soak up the atmosphere. You were just calculating which of the other guys you could out-sprint in the finish.
Well, still, when I arrived in my first Paris Roubaix with Roger Rogiers, I knew in the sprint I was a better sprinter. But you're always concerned coming in, leading into the track here. You can get a flat, you can slide off. You just never know. So there's always that little bit of nervousness there, where when you're on your own, a minute and a half ahead, it's a much more relaxing situation.
I think when you arrived for your first win in Paris-Roubaix, Sean, Roger Rogiers was a very young rider. I don't think he expected to even be there, did he?
Well, I think he was happy to be in the final with me.
Yep.
But again, when a rider gets into a final, he always hopes that he can do something spectacular on the day. And in a sprint, you just never know what a rider has left, and everybody arrives tired at the end of a Paris-Roubaix. But as I said, the situation Bonen is in is such more relaxing situation, and you can just enjoy the last number of kilometres, and certainly the lap around the track here, you can enjoy it so much more.
Well, it ain't over till it's over. The sticker on the top of the top tube of Tom Bonen's bike shows each cobbled section as they've gone along. He now knows that he could, if he'd have had a big ballpoint pen, he could have ticked those off one by one. Yep, conquered that one. Yep, ahead on that one. Yep, done that one. But barring any disaster now, with less than 6 kilometres to go, and the rain just hanging there overhead, Tom Bonen is going to enter the velodrome here in Roubaix as a 4-time winner and equal the record of Roger De Vlaming, which is an absolute, which has stood since 1977, is absolutely extraordinary. Remember, of course, he's had a magnificent season already, Tom Bonen. He's already won Gent-Wevelgem, E3, Flanders, Harelbeke, and he's going to win this one as well. I can't remember a rider in modern times who's dominated the early sprint classics in Flanders and northern France here with so much aplomb. I mean, it's been an interesting season in the fact that his major rival has been sidelined from this race, certainly. And, of course, couldn't finish Tour of Flanders, but that must not take anything away from Tomica here. This is a magnificent performance. Terpstra, his teammate, now 1 minute and 50 seconds. Nicky himself's had a terrific year so far. Look at the crowds lining the side of the road. And he's almost upon his last legs, I think, now, though, Sean, Tom Bonen. He's still turning the pedals around, but he's got that look of him of thinking, I've only just got to keep it going for 5 kilometres. I've got enough, but I am now very tired.
Yes, and he'll be well aware of the advantage he's got, over a minute and a half on the chasers. And when you're in that position, well, then you can knock it off a little bit. You don't have to, give it 100%. And that's possibly what Bonen is doing. this is a section also where it kicks up quite a bit, and it does hurt a lot at this stage in the race. Everybody is just, really on the limit here, and Bonin is after being out there for so long on his own, and it is hurting. But I think everybody, the chasers here, although when you have 3 riders to share the pace setting behind, I think everybody is just going to struggle on this little drag.
A little look behind by Juan Antonio Fletcher just to make sure that they've got a bit of a gap. Wilfred Peters is a happy man at the moment. Come on, good Tom, you've done it. You've done it. You've equalled the record. You are the dominant classics rider of your generation, although Fabian Cancellara may be held up against you. Every generation turns up a titanic battle between riders, and there are always those who are knocking around a central 1 or 2. Merckx and de Vlaming, and we had riders like Van Springel and Godefroot around at the same time. Some of the times they ride for the same teams. If you think about Museo and Van Petegem riding for opposite teams, but they were of the same time period. But Tom Bonin this year has shown he is the man of the hour. Magnificent. Merckx, de Vlaming, you could put Moser in that group as well. There was a whole section of races back in the early 1960s that were totally dominated by the Flandrians. Leon van Dalen, Noel Forêt, Rick Van Looy, of course, and his Fiemme teammate Peter Post, the Dutchman. And I think I'm right in saying Fred de Bruyn was actually a Walloon, but they've always throw up rivals of an era. Unfortunately, the main rival for this man, Fabian Cancellara, crashing out in Flanders and not here, but he'll be looking at home thinking that is some magnificent performance. 3 kilometers to go for Tom Bonin. He broke away with Nicky Terpstra at just over the 50-kilometer mark, about 53.9 or something similar. There's the Roubaix Velodrome. We're stuck underneath that grandstand on the far side of the shot that you can see, and Bonin is a very happy man, and I'm not surprised. The gap just went out and out and out and out, Sean, and it only came down by about, what, 15 seconds or so when Lars Bohm attacked. But other than that, nobody's been able to touch him, and there were 14 men behind.
Yes, there were 14 men, but of course we only see 2 or 3 men riding.
Only 3 chasing.
Sky was the only team, they had the numbers, of course, and they did sacrifice 2 of their men who did a great ride behind and put in a big performance, rode for many kilometers, but still weren't able to eat into the advantage of Bonin majorly. He held on so well, and he's just held on for 50 kilometers, which is a chapeau of a ride.
That's a proper ride. That's a proper ride. 50 kilometers of riding pretty much by himself. Sky couldn't show the quality of riders chasing though, and they weren't just hanging about. They weren't all looking at each other. They were really chasing him. Ian Stannard, Matthew Heyman, Edvald Bosenhagen, Fletcher, Lars Bohm, Martin Wijnands, Macho Tozzato, Brian van Someren. They've all chased, and none of them have made any impression on this man, and it's held rock solid at 1 minute and 32 seconds and just 1.5 kilometers. 4. He knows the record is there. The record of Roger de Vlaming is going to be equalled, and he's got time in his career, Sean, to make it 5.
He certainly has. He's very capable of winning another number of Paris Roubaix, and when you look at the record of the history of Paris Roubaix, the Belgians coming into today, they had 54 wins, so Bonin is going to make it 55 to 28 for the 28 for France and 13 for Italy.
Into the entrance of the Velodrome comes Tom Bonin, the darling of the Flandrians. The Belgian rider has ridden away from his rivals is a right-hand flick and then another right hand onto the velodrome itself. That's a great shot. Here he comes. Listen to the crowd. Tom Bonen has a lap and a half to make a historic day. He'll be the first man to win Gent-Wevelgem, E3, Shell de Pries, Paris Roubaix, Tour of Flanders, all in the same year. And a Harold Becker, of course, but he will also equal the record of Roger de Vlaeminck of 4 wins. That is a magnificent ride by Tom Bonen. He wasn't beset by mechanical problems. He rode brilliantly over the cobbles. His team kept things under control, and the combined might of Sky especially could not peg him back. Tom Bonen just has one more corner and he could coast into victory here at Paris Roubaix. The 110th edition of this fantastic race is won by the joint Mr. Paris Roubaix. Tom Bonen takes the win. An extraordinary 50-kilometer plus effort. And now it's going to be a 3-way sprint for the finish. Fletcher at the back, Bohm in the middle, Balan, who has probably the lesser sprint of the 3, in the front, and it's going to be cagey around. For your money, Sean, who's going to take second and third here?
Lars Bohm.
Yep.
Fletcher.
I would have gone exactly with you for that. Balan is just going to have to sit there and do what he can. Wilfred Peters straight out of the car. There's Patrick Lefevre on the left, the silver-haired gentleman, the manager of the Omega Pharma Quick Step team, just biding his time. Bohm at the front of these 3, with Balan right at the back, Fletcher being sandwiched in the middle. They take the bell, and there's riders coming up behind. That's a great ride by Nicky Terpstra and Sebastian Turgot, and I don't think they know they're there. I don't think they know they're there. Terpstra gets onto the back. Is it going to be a 1-2? Whoops, suddenly Lars Bohm is aware of it. He's going to lead the sprint out. They've got 2 more bends to go. And Turgot, the man right at the back, pushing a bigger gear, gets in the wheel tracks of Fletcher. Balan trying to come around the outside now. Fletcher leading out. Lars Bohm is out of this one. Fletcher looks like he's going to take second. Sebastian Turgot is going in from the outside, as is Alessandro Balan. Sebastian Turgot, is he going to make it to the line before Balan? He does. I think he gets second. Sebastian Turgot, who has been active all day, I think gets the second there, just ahead of Alessandro Balan. But there's the man of the hour. Tom Bonen takes his 4th Paris-Roubaix victory. That's a fine chase back on by Turgot. Sure, that's magnificent. I don't think they realised they were there when they got in the velodrome. It's either Balan or Turgot. He's got a podium place.
Balan.
Balan gets the second.
Yes, and what a performance by Turgot.
Oh.
As you said, you know, they did not realise they were coming up, but the other riders, it just shows how everybody was just at the end of their energy, because Bohm also, you would expect him to be able to put up a sprint there, and it's Balan who was the strongest, just that little bit more power left.
Big track throw for the line. Here comes the next group on the road. There's Jan van Summeren, Mathieu Ladagnou, Martin Weinens. Matt Heyman in this group as well. They're at 2:52. They take the bell. Matteo Tozzato. And whoops, a little bit of pushing to get into line. And the last man is Luca Paolini in this group. Paolini, probably the man with the best sprint in the group. Tozzato can sprint though. And we'll see who gets this one. Coming right the way from behind is Ladagnou. Heyman gets into his wheel. Tozzato going for a long one as they come into turn 3, into turn 4 of the banking. And Tozzato's going to take this one. He's going to ride away, is he? Or is Heyman going to come out? Nope. Still a long run to the line. Tozzato from this group. Then Heyman. Well, there was a magnificent win for Tom Bonen. Turgot gets second provisionally. That's the provisional 1, 2, 3. Tom Bonen, Sebastian Turgot, Alessandro Ballan from. So France get onto the podium, as do Italy. Belgium are on the top step. The Flandrian Tom Bonen making it a 4th win. Oh, that's close. I wouldn't want to be a commissaire there. I don't want to be a commissaire there. That's a horrible one. There was a big article in one of the Belgian newspapers this morning with, yesterday, sorry, with Rick van Looy, the Emperor himself, talking about how Tom Bonen is in this particular race. Remember the reason they had a big article in there? Van Looy won Gent-Wevelgem, Tour Flanders, Paris Roubaix, all in one season. I think 62 was the season. But he didn't win the other two we were talking about, E3 being one of them, or Harold Becker. Van Looy winning in 61, 62 and 1965. There's Sylvain Chavanel riding with Gregory Rast, I think. No, it's not Rast he's come in with, it's Hayden Ralston, who was riding with him a little earlier. Covered in the dust and grime of Paris Roubaix. A good race for you, Sean. Have you enjoyed it?
Yes, it's been a fabulous race, and you know, I think Bonen, you know, he really made an exciting race of it. You know, going out at that point with 50+ kilometers to go and riding away. It was certainly, you know, there was a lot of suspense there between that 50 and 20 kilometers to go. I was always concerned that we would see some of the riders, you know, going in the attack, and possibly Bonen paying for the earlier effort going out very, very early, but not at all. You know, what a performance by Tom Bonen, and you know, he was the big favourite coming into the race, and he just took the race by the scruff of the neck and took it on early and just dominated the race.
Tyler Farrar finishing for Garmin Barracuda. But magnificent race from Tom Bonen. I mean, that really is old school bike racing, Sean, isn't it? Well, I mean, Cancellara has done similar things in the recent past, but the two of them, the predominant classics riders of their generation, certainly in the Flandrian classics.
Yes, well, of course, Cancellara, he's a specialist for going long breakaways, and he's got to do it because in the sprint he's not as strong as Bonen. So, you know, Bonen could have waited for much longer in this race.
Bonen, Turgot, Ballan. That's the provisional 1, 2, 3. I can't remember ever seeing a race as close for second as Sebastian Turgot and Alessandro Ballan. Terrific ride by Terpstra and Turgot to get back on level terms as they went into the final bend of the Roubaix velodrome, and Turgot hanging on in there, the grim death coming around the outside and really having a good go at getting second on the podium. We'll have to see what who gets presented, because it was so close. I wouldn't want to be a commissaire on that job today. Manuel Cinziato just coming over the line there, you could see on the far left hand side. So the World Tour now has Tom Bonen at its head, have Simon Gerrans and Samuel Sanchez. Well, welcome back. It's that period of the day, isn't it, where you just sit back and think, I can take a breath now. Even if you're watching on the edge of your sofa. Just a magnificent, magnificent ride by Tom Bonen. And yesterday in the papers was saying, year of records, jaar van de record for Tom Bonen. That's exactly what it has been, having won E3 against Wevelgem, Ronde van Vlaanderen, and today Paris Roubaix. Magnificent ride, and they were comparing him to Roger de Vlaeminck. It's a different era of cycling though, and here is Bonen himself, and we can't hear it. No sound, unfortunately, so we don't know if you're hearing it or not. We can't hear it, and apparently back in Paris and Eurosport they can't hear it either, so we can only speculate what he's saying. Now, Bonen's quite a different rider to the riders we were talking about before, who are of his generation. Sounds come through. Hang on a minute. Okay, I think he was just saying that I decided to attack because nobody wanted to work beforehand. I just took it kilometre by kilometre. When you came into the velodrome, what did it feel like for you? Well, I knew I'd already won. I had that feeling that I've already won, so I was in good shape, so I could just enjoy myself, really.
Doublé, Flandre, Paris Roubaix. Vous rejoignez Roger de Vlaeminck et ses 4 victoires.
It was a good team day we had today, and we've had great results this year. So you're now part of the history of Roubaix. You've won 4 times. Yeah, I think this is the way to do it as well, says Tom Bonen. Well, sorry we didn't have any sound at the beginning of that. I have no idea if you did it at home. A different type of rider, Tom Bonen, to the riders who he'll be compared with now, like de Vlaeminck, like Freddie Martens, or like well, never won Roubaix actually, but Van Petegem, Museo, for example. These guys chose to live at home. They chose to live in their near or close to or where they were born. True quotes, true Flandrians, as we see Wilfred Peters congratulating Tom Bonen. Peters himself, a proper Flandrian. There he is. But Tom, of course, very early a world champion, like Merckx was very early a world champion, but went off to live in Monaco. Did enjoy his lifestyle down in Monaco for a while, but the news is he's going to come back to Belgium to live, so it's all going to change again. Very much a different generation to the older riders of that, the last generation, the Van Petegems and the Museus, but no less for it, Sean. A terrific. He's come back into form as he's got more focused again. Well, yes, he has been more focused, and from what we believe, this winter he's put in a lot of work in the last 6 months. He's worked very hard, and last year was a very difficult year for him. He had crashed in this Paris Roubaix, had a lot of mechanical problems. The Tour of France, remember, he crashed and had to pull out 2 days later. So it was a real difficult year for Bonen last year, and that's what big champions are about. They're able to recover from a bad year, get back, work at it, back to the drawing board, and that's what Tom Bonen has done. Yeah, you get the feeling that when Bonen attacked, he just decided to attack, didn't he? And Terpstra went with him. That was his job to do that. But that particular shot we've just seen then of Terpstra hanging off the wheel of Bonen. Bonen was clearly going so fast for him that he'd done as much as he could, and he just couldn't stay with him. Yes, and that is it's an interesting point there, because when you have a teammate with you, you can afford to knock it back a little bit, get him over that section of cobbles, and then he can be very valuable for you later on. And that was one of the things I was looking at tactic-wise. Bonen, would he have been better when he was at 40 kilometres to go? I was saying maybe he should have just took it a little bit easy on that section. Held Terpstra with him, and he would have been very important, because we see Terpstra recovered very well, got back into that group. We see him coming in here very strong in the final. So you look at all of these tactics, but in the end of the day, Bonen was so strong today, he did not need anybody. We've seen some good editions of Paris Roubaix over the last few years, haven't we? Last year's was interesting and great for Johan van Sommeren. Nice to see a rider you didn't have possibly as an out-and-out favourite winning. This year, Tom Bonen did come in as the favourite with the absence of Fabian Cancellara. It would have been interesting to see how the two of them match up. We'd have had a 50-kilometre two up, according to what's been happening in the last few years. But fascinating race today. Again, always exciting. That's the new indoor velodrome they're building nearest to us. You see the big white oval-shaped building there here in Roubaix. The old outside track has been not always the home for Paris Roubaix. Yeah, they haven't always finished here on this velodrome. They've sometimes finished elsewhere. But I'm certainly glad they do. It's a fantastic little amphitheatre for the race to finish in, and we're just waiting for the podium ceremony.
And as you mentioned, Cancellara, you know, it's a pity we hadn't Cancellara here, because we would have had some battle today. The form that Tom Bonen is in. I suppose the other thing is, with the two of them, if they ride away from everybody, the race would have been over with 50 kilometres, and they would have not been that suspense which we had here with Tom Bonen. Was he going to stay out front? Would he be strong enough to do it? So, you know, we had a great race, and a magnificent race from Tom Bonen.
Tom Bonen joins Roger de Vlamingh in the annals of Paris-Roubaix winners as a 4-time winner. Roger de Vlamingh, first winning the race in 1972. He won again in 74, 75 and 1977. Tom Bonen took his first victory back in 2005. He won again in 2008 and 2009, and now takes a 4th victory. And there is the trophy, and I'm always amazed, as I've said, how on earth do you hold it up over your head after you've just ridden nearly 260 kilometres. Weighs a ton, that thing. I picked one up off a winner's desk once, and it does absolutely weigh a ton. That is a proper stone they've lifted out of their course. They did replace it, but that's the way they do it. That picture there will be all over the Belgian press tomorrow. And Frédéric Guédon has just arrived in the velodrome, 41 years of age. And this is the last race of Frédéric Guédon's career. There he is, winner of this race in 1997, winner of Paris Tour 10 years afterwards. Had a crash early on today. It was involved in a crash early on today. No glory for Guédon today, but what a magnificent end to his career to go around the velodrome. And a big shout out for him. Sebastian Turgot, he did indeed get second. That's a brilliant run. That's great. As he was active all day today, Sean, he was very, very active.
Yes, he certainly was. We see, you know, he was very much in the race, got involved a lot, and I think he was a bit surprised himself when he came back into that group in the very end and managed, you know, to get onto the podium. I think he would have definitely signed for that this morning at the starting Compiègne.
Yeah, certainly would. That's incredible. I really wouldn't. What did they measure it on? Did they measure on their helmets in the end? It's right if you've got an extra long neck. I've no idea. And Alessandro Ballan, third. Yeah, 2/3 in 1 week for Alessandro Ballan. Well, I hope you've enjoyed Paris-Roubaix as much as I have. It's been magnificent once again. And I've got to say, I've always liked the Tour of Flanders as my favourite race, but I wasn't too keen on the New Parcours. It's always the riders that make the race, of course, but New Parcours, not for me. This remains unchanged and undimmed as absolutely brilliant. Well, Eurosport continues with live cycling. We've got Giro del Trentino very shortly, about a week. I've got a few days off, thank God for that. And then we're back for Romandy, and then Sean and I will be on the Giro d'Italia very shortly. Chapeau to Tom Bonan from Sean and myself. Have a good day. Bye for now.